minute.
Just give me the number.
Hamas is the...
Oh, I see the strategy she's going for. She's literally not going to answer this question.
You have some serious listening comprehension issues, Eli.
Oh, then ask her again. Wait, so I'm sorry. So then what should Israel have done?
I can slow it down for you and say it again if you're struggling to understand, Eli. Would you like me to say it for you again?
Anything, Brianna. Okay. I'm asking you. You were asked what Israel should have done.
Yeah, what should they do? Ask her again. Please make her answer the question.
As the moderator, I do agree with
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, make her answer.
You haven't answered my question.
The right of return. Do you not know what the right of return is?
So after October 7th, they should have allowed 6 million Palestinians to move back to Israel proper. That should have been the response?
So in response to October 7th, Israel should have instituted the right of return.
Come on, answer the question.
Why is this so difficult?
Jesus.
Okay.
5 minutes to start. Brianna, why don't we start with you?
Oh.
Opening statement.
I think when we talked about this, I said, well, I don't really feel like I have an opening statement. And in some ways, I feel as though the reality of what's been happening on the ground for the last 7
Damn, he didn't do like an intro or anything. He just sat there and was like, I don't even think she's fully seated yet. And he's like, give us an opening. Holy shit.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
She's like...
I said I'd give everybody 5 minutes to start. Brianna, why don't we start with you?
Oh.
Opening statement.
I think when we talked about...
I feel like Brianna's pantsuit is nice. I don't have any basis whatsoever for women's fashion, so I can't even begin to... I have no idea.
As I said, well, I don't really feel like I have an opening statement. And in some ways, I feel as though the reality of what's been happening on the ground for the last 7 months speaks for itself. People who started out at the beginning of this conflict feeling very strongly that Israel merited a response to an attack, which, as we all know, was the deadliest since the Holocaust, have now, after seeing 7 months in which 34,000, conservatively, people have been killed.
Conservatively? Well, technically now it's like, conservatively would be 25 or something thousand, right? You can't tell if something looks appealing or not. Are you this fashion retarded? No, you have to develop a taste or an intuition for what looks good or not. You don't just have it automatically. Pretty sure what looks good to some people doesn't to other people in different countries, and through time, different things have looked good or not good.
3/4 of whom are women and children feel like enough is enough. And so if this framing of this conversation is, has Israel gone too far? I think that's almost a different question from whether or not, or what the future of Palestinians, what the future of Gazans in particular should be. So I think I'd start it there, and I'm interested to respond.
Fine. Let me just jump in, though, because the motion is it a just war rather than has Israel gone too far? Do you feel it's a just war? Do you feel it's a just war?
International law gives us two good guiding principles for evaluating the justness of a particular conflict. You have your jus ad bellum and jus in bello. The two different concepts are, one has to do with your right to go to war, and the second has to do with your conduct in war. If you're familiar with both of these terms, it can help you give a better answer, because you might be able to say, for instance, I think that Israel had a right to go to war, but I believe their conduct in war is unacceptable. Or you might even say for Hamas, I think that the Palestinians have a right to resistance. I think their cause for war was righteous, but their conduct in war is not righteous. If you don't have in your mind the template for these two thoughts, it becomes very difficult, in my opinion, to navigate the conduct, or I'm sorry, it becomes difficult to navigate the conversation, because now you're stuck defending or rejecting the entirety of what's going on. We'll see how she answers.
No, I'm struggling because I don't think I would characterize it as a war at all, given how one-sided it is, and given that one side is being denied the right to have a state in the first place.
None of this makes sense. Non-state actors can engage in armed conflict. A disproportionate war doesn't mean it's not a war. So far as this is nonsense, but...
As recently as yesterday, the United States vetoed a UN resolution to recognize Palestine as a state. And so the term war is more typically just applied to more equal parties, and I think
I'm not even aware of that. I don't know if I've even read the word war. When it comes to international law, I'm not even sure. Usually what you see is, I think you'll see things described as, I think it's international armed conflict or non-international armed conflict. What are they? It's international armed conflict. I think it's international armed conflict versus non-international. I might just call it non-international armed conflict. But I don't know if any in my international humanitarian law reading or law of armed conflict, I don't think I've ever read the term like war. Like, this is how we define war. I think it's always just described as like armed conflict, international or non-international. So, but this is, yeah.
War is more typically
One of the reasons why reading stuff and having a working, like fluid vocabulary in a particular field is valuable is because when you hear people use certain terms, you can very quickly discover like where are you at in this conversation, like how much have you read, how much have you not read, and all of you know this because if you guys work in certain jobs or if you have certain interests, there's a vocabulary that you develop very quickly, and there's an understanding you develop very quickly, such that if somebody were to ask you a question about something or say a particular thing, you could very quickly identify, like, wait, hold on. I don't think that you're a part of my tribe, or I don't think you're a part of like this community if you're saying things like this, you know, like you can just identify very quickly. Now, maybe she's read different stuff and maybe my vocabulary isn't as deep as hers or whatever. So, you know, who knows, but we'll find out.
We just recognize Palestine as a state. And so the term war is more typically just applied to more equal parties, and I think the asymmetry...
That has nothing to do with what you... International or non-international conflict has nothing to do with the parties being equal or anything whatsoever.
Here is what I think a lot of people balk at, even as they are rightly, horrified by the loss of innocent life on October 7th.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah, I don't think it's a just war. I don't think it's a just war for two reasons. I agree with what Briahnna said very much about the specific conditions under which this war has been fought. The massive amount of civilians' lives lost, 70%.
So again, your difference of conduct in war versus cause for war, he's interchanging the two, maybe because he just doesn't have the vocabulary or the template in his mind to separate the two, but it does help you navigate this, because you can, I think the progressive side, you could argue, well, you should argue, like, yeah, sure, Israel might have a cause for war, a jus ad bellum, but their conduct in war, their jus in bello, is unethical. I don't approve of how they've conducted the war. You could argue that if you wanted to be a bit more nuanced about it.
Of the casualties have been women and children. That means a minimum of about 25,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza.
This debate was 2 weeks ago. When did the UN revise their numbers down? Because that's significant. I wonder if that's going to be brought up by the other side.
No government in any war since the 1980s has killed civilians at as fast a rate, with the exception of full-blown genocides like Rwanda.
Rate this guy's fit, gray jacket, pink shirt, and jeans. I don't know anything about mixing different materials yet. All the stuff that I've experimented with recently has just been short sleeve button-ups, some type of under t-shirt, and then some type of like slacks or trousers or whatever. So I don't know about mixing all the different materials together. I wouldn't be able to say. Personally, I don't think I like these colors together too much, but maybe it would depend on the shoes, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know anything about like jackets or anything either, so it might be fine. I'm not sure. I don't know. Don't have a strong opinion on it.
Or the Second Congo War, which is the bloodiest war since World War II. And this isn't some accident. This isn't because, Hamas is just hiding and using these people as human shields. It's because Israel has policies that allows them to kill up to 20 civilians if it leads to the death of a single suspected junior militant.
Where does that come from? These things are usually, I don't think anybody's ever officially published. Did this come from that AI article where they're trying to figure out like, oh, we think they can kill 20 for everyone? I don't know if those numbers are ever published. Why can't you just wear what you like? Where's the evidence mentality for fashion is cringe and gay. Well, I don't know. There's just things that people accept as like looks good or doesn't. There's social norms and shit. Usually clothes communicate stuff like that.
And hundreds of civilians to kill a single senior Hamas commander. So I don't think that's just. There's also starvation. I mean, in the debate, we'll go through a bunch of things. But the other part of it we have to think about is what is Israel fighting for? October 7th was a tragedy. It was a massacre. It should have never happened. It should never happen again. But this conflict didn't start on October 7th. And what
I hope they ask, but they won't because it's not a quick question back and forth. When someone says, oh, it didn't start on October 7th? When did it start? Because most of them will say something like 1948. And it's like, oh, okay, not really. Didn't really start there, but...
Israel is fighting for is to have a Jewish state in Palestine, an ethnically Jewish state. That is identity politics. I think anybody here that had a...
Okay. One thing you should be very, 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 very scared of, okay? You should be very aware of this, is when Western people apply Western frameworks to non-Western countries and non-Western conflict. That should be, the klaxons should be blaring in your mind when you hear people do it. Doesn't always mean they're wrong or that their analysis is incorrect, but to describe a war in the Middle East and to bring up the phrase identity politics that's pretty wild. Maybe he'll justify it.
State. That is identity politics. I think anybody here that had a problem with identity politics on any topic over the...
When would you say the conflict started? There's a range. I think probably, like, I would say 1880s is getting you close, or maybe the early 1900s, 1920s, maybe, somewhere around there.
Over the woke wars over the last couple of years, you shouldn't be supporting the United States sending $300 billion to, one of the most clear-cut examples of identity politics.
That is an insane statement. Even if you want to use the term idpol and identity politics to say that Israel is a clear-cut example of it, like if they are, it would be in response to the idpol of the supposedly united Arab world or the supposedly united Muslim world. That's a wildly stupid statement to make. What do you consider the Western world to entail? West is it's describing like a train of thought, probably originating in like northern and western European universities and like U.S. universities and Canada. So it'd probably be like your most of Europe except for Eastern and Southeastern Europe. It would be the U.S., Canada, and then probably like New Zealand and Australia would be like the Western world, I think you would say. Can you explain what he means by identity politics? He's saying like white people or Jewish people versus whatever else. It's just, I don't know. I'm not even sure. I don't even know if I want to try to explain what he means by that. I truly don't know. We'll find out as this debate goes on.
One of the most clear-cut examples of identity politics in the Middle East. This is not good for U.S. security. This harms us. And that money makes it easier for Israel to avoid making peace with its neighbors. So I don't think the ultimate cause...
He's bringing up the identity politics stuff to try and make a dig at the opponent, Michael Moynihan, who is known for being an anti-identity politics guy. Okay, maybe. Could be a rhetorical strategy.
Cause of the Zionist project is just. I, for the exact same reason, I opposed all the wokeness of the left. So I don't think the ultimate cause of the Zionist project is just. I, for the exact same reason, I opposed.
The ultimate cause of the Zionist project was because Jews felt, and probably were persecuted throughout the entirety of the world, through basically the last 2,000 years of history. And Jews were like, I feel like it'd be cool if we had a place of our own so that we didn't have to get fucked by everybody, essentially. That's the Zionist project. So his opposition here, if you take what he's saying at face value, is that he's opposed to the creation and the existence of an ethnically Jewish state. He is in opposition to that. I don't know if he felt that it was unfair in the 1800s and the 1900s for them to feel that way or what, but I don't know. Okay. It's generally as a progressive, and generally if you're arguing from a pro-Palestinian perspective, I don't think you want to go with the anti-Zionist argument because you're immediately going to be lumped into an anti-Semitic argument, and truthfully, it's going to be pretty hard to separate yourself from that. That's a pretty crazy, like maybe, not to be Jewish, but maybe absent the Holocaust, you could say that that's kind of a ridiculous argument, but keep in mind the Holocaust happened after Jews were already like, man, bro, we're getting everywhere. We need to get the out of Europe and the rest of the world, and then the Holocaust happened, so that's a pretty rough one to make, but okay.
Just, I, for the exact same reason I opposed all the wokeness of the last couple of years, I oppose the goal of having a Jewish ethno-state, but then also the conduct in the war has not been just.
Oh, so he does separate conduct and cause. He just thinks both are unjust. Okay.
So October 7th was a tragedy. Hamas should not be in power, and I have no problem with
what's he going to say? With UN resolutions to remove Hamas? Or I really like where you're at after your trip. Something that gets discounted in the conflict of the 40s, 70s is that it was motivated by pan-Arabism, which is now dead. What do you think of the blockers for normalization today? Iran, Israel, like Israel probably mindset, and probably Palestinians. those three groups are probably the biggest players right now in preventing some kind of conflict resolution.
Problem with terrorists and murderers being taken out, but there are also terrorists and murderers amongst the Israeli government.
Just before I move on, please.
Clapper.
A quick zoom in. One thing I found very interesting, you talked about the Israeli army ratios for who they're allowed to kill on what basis. What ratio would you be comfortable with?
It's not that I have a particular ratio in mind.
If it was 1 to 5, would that be okay?
Well, to be clear, you should talk about where those numbers are coming from. There was a really explosive report that came out maybe...
Ooh, I don't like that she bailed him out. That was a good question from Konstantin. Like, okay, well, this ratio is unacceptable. What ratio would be acceptable? Because if you don't even have one in mind, then how do you even know this one is bad? Are you really... One of my biggest problems with a lot of the pro-Pali arguments is they try to use a bunch of these arguments to say that this particular thing is not acceptable, but really in their mind, what they want is just a cessation of the war completely, no matter what, period, full stop. That's it. They don't want the war happening at all. And then they try to find a lot of small arguments to say like, oh, that's why when people come in my chat, they're like, oh, did you see this last thing that Israel did? Does this make you against the war now? And it's like, wait, what? No, I don't know if anything could make me against the war in terms of cause for the war. I mean, there's a certain amount of conduct that would make me say, okay, well, Israel's not conducting this war in a good way. People either need to be arrested, held accountable in some other way, leadership needs to change, or maybe if it's really bad, the war needs to end. But people are always just looking for these micro arguments around the edges. But really what they want is just a total cessation of the war and usually a disassembly of the state of Israel. But that's a further argument you don't have to make. But more often than not, that's what it ends up being.
You should talk about where those numbers are coming from. There was a really explosive report that came out maybe 3 weeks, a month ago from Plus 976
Yes, that's
magazine.
correct. Yeah.
970, I might be getting the number wrong.
972, I think.
972,
Yeah.
it's the area code, it's the country code. The discovery was that some intelligence sources from the IDF were talking about AI technology that was being deployed in lieu of human judgment and the risk tolerances of the...
I've never heard that before. I didn't read that full article. I only skimmed it. So maybe it does say something different. But my understanding was that the AI is deployed in early parts to identify targets, but there's still human intervention at the end to okay things or to fact check stuff. Does it say anything? I don't know if I have time or even the desire to read this whole thing, but I've never heard that the AI thing was used from start to finish. Yeah, I don't think any target is done unilaterally with AI. I guess I can't make that strong statement because I haven't read this whole article, so. But we'll see if they respond.
AI that was being used to assess whether or not a given target should be targeted and killed. And when human judgment was a bigger part of the equation, one, there was an oversight that didn't exist when you're just letting the computer run it. But one of the more pernicious aspects of the AI is that they had, whereas human judgment would say, well, if it's a very, very high-ranking person, there's a more risk tolerance. If it's a low-ranking person, there's less risk tolerance. There was a conflation of who was actually targeted in the first place, and the evidence that was being used to target someone in the first instance was very flimsy. So if you lived in the same household with someone who might be a member of Hamas and were once on the same cell phone plan, you are a target. Very flimsy
okay, but
things like that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to get to the bottom of this issue before I give them a chance to...
The point is...
My question is different. Sorry, Briahnna,
right.
sorry.
But the point is that once someone is identified, right, targeted,
Let's get into that in a second. I just want to finish this one point.
I don't have an answer for you, but what I know is you should not be the worst since the 1980s. Like if you...
So the fact that he doesn't have an answer here is a little bit of a red flag. I wouldn't expect him to have an exact answer, but... We went over this before when it came to like policing in the United States. There's a good Scott Alexander article on this, that people will have an outrage, but they can't moderate it based on information. It's just a vibe. So if I tell you, for instance, okay, well, last year, 1,000 unarmed black men were killed by 100,000 police in the United States. How would that make you feel? Okay, well, that's horrible. It sounds bad. What did I say? 100,000 killing 1,000. Well, what if I say there's not actually 100,000 police in the United States? There's 1 million police, right? And the number of encounters is actually 10 times higher than you thought. Does that make you feel 1/10 as bad? Okay, well, I thought we only had 100,000 police, and these 100,000 police had managed to kill 1,000 black people. I thought 1 out of 100 police officers executed a black man. Well, now I find out the number is only 1 out of 1,000 instead of 1 out of 100. Does that meaningfully change the way you feel? For most people, it doesn't. They have no concept of whatever. What if I cut the number of innocent black people killed by 90%? What if I say instead of 1,000 black people killed, it was 100 black people killed, right? Or 10, right? even when you change the numbers significantly by 90% or increase them by 900%, by 1,000%, it doesn't actually moderate or impact the way people feel about a particular thing at all, which is problematic. It shows that you're not engaging a critical part of your brain, but rather you're going by like, you're too narratively driven, and you're not, your feelings aren't reflecting any kind of like facts on the ground. They're reflecting like a narrative that's a little bit detached from reality, more detached than it should be.
You're probably not a justice.
So I'm sorry, to bring this back to this, I don't think that the guy should be required to say, hey, I think that the only acceptable ratio should be 2.78 civilian deaths for every one militant. Like, I don't think he should be required to do that, but he should be able to say something like, well, I don't know, like at least it's got to be under like 3 or 4. Like, you know, past that is crazy. He should have some kind of ratio in mind if he thinks that this one is bad. Otherwise, if you think this one's bad, but you don't even know what good would be, I mean, what is bad if it's just not good? Like, is any civilian death too much?
Not be the worst since the 1980s. Like, if you are, you're probably not a just war. So,
I guess what
Like, that argument doesn't make any sense, right? It just doesn't, you know?
I'm asking is, at what point would it be, what ratio is the acceptable
restating the
one?
question.
That's what I'm asking.
well,
Briahnna wants to, oh, she almost spoke. She wants to bail him out so bad. Is it because she knows he doesn't have an answer? Watch, she almost goes to answer again.
What ratio is the acceptable one? That's what I'm asking.
well, I
Okay,
don't know,
go
but
ahead.
if we could get closer to, you know,
Okay.
the American assault.
What is good for you? In my personal opinion, it depends on the debate that I'm preparing for. If I was preparing for a debate on stage with a bunch of retards, which most people are, I actually don't have a good one in mind right now, because the one that I used to use, I don't even know if it's right. There was one that said that 90% of killed people in combat were civilians. So 9-1 was one that I've used in the past. But that one is often cited, and it comes from a UN press release. But that UN press release, I don't think bases that number on anything. So instead, I've seen people that break down, and it goes, and that's a wild UN statement. It's probably not true. Or the truth part of that is it's like 90% of huge conflicts are civilian casualties. It goes into a whole bunch of other shit. I've seen people that will go into civilian to military deaths in certain battles or in micro conflicts. So like they'll say like the Battle of Fallujah had this. That's probably more appropriate to compare to the entire war, like in Gaza right now, because it's all like heavily urbanized conflict. Yeah, so if I'm having like a good faith discussion with somebody, truly, you're never really going by ratios. You're going by the apparent conduct and the pattern of attacks. That's probably what you should be going by, right? Is there a pattern of behavior that makes us feel as though Israel is indiscriminately targeting civilian deaths? Like if you start to see like building after building of like hundreds of civilians just being slaughtered, and it seems like there's no military deaths being posted by the IDF, you know, then this is cause for concern. But then obviously for this conflict, it gets even more difficult because Hamas doesn't fight in uniforms. The Hamas medical people don't ever post military deaths, so now we're only relying on the IDF side, and it's notoriously difficult to figure out what an acceptable range of deaths should even be. I think.
Assaults in Afghanistan and Iraq, those were terrible, but they were better than this.
Okay.
See, like when people say one was better than the other, it's kind of weird because one thing that people like to do, I tweeted about this, people use this weird like death rate by day like it means anything. Like it's just kind of weird and dumb. I don't know. Like measuring like this many people have died per day because so if this conflict were to draw out for 10 years and nobody else were to die, all of a sudden the conflict would be way better because the casualty rate would decrease. It's just stupid, I think. Yeah. I mean, how is Israel doing compared to the average would be the question, I'd think. Maybe, but the problem with Israel and Palestine is that it is truly a conflict that's beyond comparison. I don't think that this region maps on cleanly to any conflict in any other part of human history. So it's hard to compare, you know, like, yeah, it's just hard. It's hard to compare. You're fighting a non-standard military that's still actually like the administrator to a region. You're fighting heavily urban conflict for the entirety of the conflict. It's not like you're moving from city to city. It's all one city, basically. It's all just a giant fucking city. You're dealing with an enemy that is trying to induce as many civilian deaths as possible. You're dealing with an unprecedented amount of microscopic analysis and criticism. Like it's just everything about this conflict makes it so that it doesn't map. It's almost just analogous to every other type of conflict on the planet. It's just very, very, very difficult. Yeah. Anytime people start making comparisons, I don't think it's bad to make comparisons, but you absolutely need to understand the limitations of those comparisons when you're making them. Yeah.
Okay,
So, I just bring it down.
Okay, we'll come back to you guys, and Briahnna, feel free to make the point about AI and everything else.
We're not going to respond to that yet. Right?
Don't, please. Can I just get a couple of quick opening statements from either of you?
Sure.
And then we can have the big fight, all right?
Personally, I would say that the best way to analyze it, I'm thinking of like stuff that Avi's posted. I would say that the best way to analyze it is probably going by like, how many Hamas militants do we think there are? How many civilians do we think there are? And then measure the approximate deaths of each, and then start to figure out a ratio of like are we killing an appropriate number of things or not, or how discriminatory or indiscriminate our bombing is. But that's going to require you to measure even that. There's going to be subjectivity to that, because I don't even know how you would compare that to other conflicts. For instance, let's say that I think there's a country of 10 million people and there's 100 militants in that entire country. Let's say that I do a bombing and I kill 100 militants and 1,000 people, right? Well, that's a 1 to 10 death ratio, which is pretty high, but there's like, what did I say, 10 million people in the country and only 100? You killed every single militant in one strike, but you also got 1,000 civilians. Like, that'd probably be an okay strike, right? You got every single militant in this attack, but you also got, right? But let's say that you got a country of 1 million people with 200,000 soldiers, and then that same attack happens where you kill 100 soldiers and 1,000 civilians. There are so many militants in this country, not as many are civilians as a percentage. How did you kill so many civilians with one strike? The numbers there, even if it was the exact same numbers, because of the ratio of military participants to civilians on the other end, it would make that attack feel different. But yeah, like truly, you're in very subjective worlds here, trying to compare these numbers around. Yeah.
So, because I want everybody to say something that they can be challenged on. Michael, is it just war?
Well, I was told there'd be no opening statements, so this is going to be a little off the cuff. And I want to first say thank you to all of my Jewish comrades who grabbed me by the shoulder before I came up here and said, the weight of the Jewish world is on your shoulders. And I assure you that I will not solve this. Briahnna will not solve it. Eli will not.
How many Hamas fighters do you think they are? I think Israel estimated like around 40 to 50,000.
But I will say this. The motion is a moral question. Is this a just war? It's slightly different than the question, is it being waged in a just manner?
Oh, okay. I don't know if he's read any international armed conflict literature, but these are the two ways that they're broadly distinguished. So he, immediately before starting his answer, he makes that distinction. That's important in my opinion. So that's good.
Slightly different than the question, is it being waged in a just manner? I suppose we can have that debate too, but let's start with the just war. If this is not a just war in principle, then there are no just wars. If one can think that on the day of October 7th, and our opponents who have both pointed this out, and they're right to do so, and I'm glad they did, the worst single day since the Holocaust. Now, remember, by the way, you have 1,200 people that were murdered in a matter of hours, in the most brutal way. Now, if anyone saw the videos that the Israeli embassy was putting out and not releasing to everybody for obvious reasons, I mean, you see a moment of a father being killed in front of his...
I didn't get to watch this video because we didn't have time. Maybe if I go again, maybe I will.
Children blown to bits, the child covered in blood, and says, "Why am I alive?" On the video taken by Hamas. What we don't often talk about when we talk about Hamas, we do get bogged down in a lot of details that are very difficult to adjudicate now because...
Wait, what? Apparently Israel created a video showcasing everything that happened on October 7th that I think is 47 minutes long or 40 minutes long, that they only showed to members of the Knesset and then some people in the media, but it's not publicly available to view anywhere. I don't know why it's not publicly available to view, because Israel hates doing any kind of positive propaganda for themselves. But I think, maybe the members of the families didn't want it to go public or whatever, but yeah. Oh, and other world leaders, yeah.
The numbers are questioned by everyone, but let's just stay in the moral argument for 1 second and say that Hamas is very clear in its charter and in its revised charter, which is no better, that it is a 7th century cult that is bent on destroying the Jewish nation. Now, if we want to say up here that we're okay with that we're okay with Israel being destroyed, a member nation of the United Nations ratified in 1948, we can talk about how this happened, etc., but Hamas wants it gone. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a war against a group of people, let's be generous and call them a group of people, that have an eliminationist ideology, to borrow from Daniel Goldhagen. It is an eliminationist ideology. They do not lie about this. When they tell you what they believe, believe them. It is clearly a just war, and I will invite interesting conversation about whether it's being waged in a just manner. That's a different question.
Before I go to your point. To push back, just for the sake of pushing back, I suppose, before I go to Eli, I really like the distinction you made between it being a just war and it being a prosecuted in a just way. Can we really make that distinction, though, based on, not least on what Jake was
Yes, you absolutely can make that distinction, of course, yeah.
saying, in the sense that if you come into my home and kill my wife, and then I go into your home and kill you, your wife, your whole family, isn't there a point at which that ceases to be just, no matter what the provocation?
It depends on if your wife is killed by an organization that is supported by sovereign states like Qatar and have enormous amounts of funding and have essentially an army. That is what the Israelis are trying to destroy. They're not trying to destroy the two people that came in and killed this particular family.
But they are killing a lot of civilians.
Of course, it is a war. And I'm not saying that I like that. I absolutely do not. And it sounds like you're just engaging in cliche when you say every death in a war is a tragedy. It is true, and you do.
Why do we have an emote in BJG that is gang stalked in your attic? Is there a story why we have this hugely stupid fucking? Is there a reason why, or what would your pushback question be if you were the host? We're just getting into like opening statements here. Why are we pushing back? I don't even know if he needs to push back yet.
You have to say it. It's not a bit of throat clearing, but when you look at these numbers, which are very, very contested. I mean, Brianna's contesting some of the other numbers, but you can also contest the number of people who have died, the number of civilians who died.
What number do you think is the number of Gazans who've died?
I would have no
I'll get
idea.
to that. I promise you I'll get to that. Let's just finish this. I want Eli to have
I will
a
say
say.
it's not I'm not on the ground there, but even Hamas has revised their numbers down. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously when you're waging a war, it's going to be brutal, and it's deeply unfortunate. There are, of course, rules of war, and I suppose we can discuss in bigger detail of how that's being engaged right now. And I think that's the question that is the hottest question that I see.
And we will get to the numbers question. Eli?
Well, I think we should start. I mean, a lot of a talking point you will.
I watched Eli Lake debate on the Comedy Cellar podcast against Finkelstein. I wasn't that impressed, but we'll see how he does here.
Here on the left usually is the war didn't start on October 7th, and that's true. So we should look at the 5-6 previous skirmishes or wars or rocket wars, whatever you want to call them, and ask the question, why didn't Israel finish off Hamas? They haven't changed. And the reason is because they understood that Hamas fights in such a despicable way as to maximize the civilian casualties on their own side. We all know, we've heard this before, that they will launch rockets from schools and mosques and so forth. But there was always, it was known to the Israelis, in fact it was known to human rights organizations, it was known to news agencies for many years that the headquarters of Hamas's Qassam brigades, their military wing, was under the largest hospital in Gaza. Who does such a thing?
Was it under the largest hospital, or was it under an UNRWA headquarters? I know they used Al-Shifa for stuff, but is Al-Shifa the largest hospital? Is that what he's referring to? If so, I haven't heard that claim before. I know Al-Shifa was used commonly, and Amnesty International, I think, has said as much, and Human Rights Watch, I believe. Wait, let me make sure I'm getting these right. Authorities allowed the family to view the body on February 7th and again on February 8th. Relatives said they asked the government-run Shifa Hospital to perform an autopsy, but their request was refused because they had no authorization from Hamas. Nice. Okay, I don't know if they'll talk about it here. I think it was, this is the report we read by Amnesty International that talks about how even back in 2014, I think even before this, people knew that Al-Shifa Hospital was used by Hamas, but...
Unless there is a deliberate strategy to both maximize civilian casualties on your adversary side as well as the people you purport to govern. Now, the atrocities committed on October 7th were just so inhumane and so barbaric and savage that it left Israel no choice but to confront this dilemma that it had been dealing with for the past 17 years. It has to destroy this organization, despite the fact that it has spent nearly 2 decades building up an infrastructure, I might add, with aid provided that was supposed to go to the people of Gaza, to build an entire underground city just for its fighters and commanders so that they can be safe as Israel retaliates for the atrocities committed by Hamas. So when you are dealing with such a stark choice, yes, there are going to be civilian casualties because the army, the military that is usually supposed to protect those civilian casualties, would rather sacrifice them for a PR victory.
Quick link break.
Robert, stop it. Y'all quit playing. Quit playing.
Robert.
I didn't do this stuff. This is not me. Y'all. I'm fighting for my life.
Okay.
And that kind of cynical thing. So back to your question, is it a just war? It absolutely is a just war, but it's more than just a just war. It's a necessary war. Because what Israel must do in eliminating Hamas is to show to every other dirtbag Islamist terrorist group and nation state like Iran that this tactic of fighting wars will not prevail. Because if Hamas survives, then you will better believe that the next wars that are fought by various kinds of fanatical terrorist groups will continue to learn from their tactics. So in my view, it's an easy question. Of course, it's a just war.
He's emotionally loading this a lot, which I think is cringe, but whatever, I expect it. Neo, damn you, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. But it is true that you need to demonstrate to the rest of the world that using human shields and these other forms of asymmetrical warfare that involve, inducing death in the civilian population shouldn't be an effective way to do war. You don't want to incentivize people to do that. In my opinion, the international community heavily incentivizes this type of behavior by being way too harsh on the Israeli side and not being harsh enough on especially non-state actors that take advantage of civilian populations.
It's a necessary war, and when Israel finishes, hopefully, Baruch Hashem, and Hamas is no more, they ought to win a Nobel Peace Prize.
So, before we open it up, I think there's probably a lot of people here who would agree with you that if you could press a button and Hamas was no longer there, that would be desirable. The question is, can you eliminate Hamas by a war in which lots and lots of innocent people are being killed and maimed, or are you going to create more terrorists?
Well, listen, there will probably always be people who will be seduced by this lunatic death cult ideology. That's for sure. But there's a huge difference between having people believing all kinds of bad ideas and then having those ideas married up with a leadership, a military, a financial arm governing a statelet, as it were. So there are still, sadly, Nazis and neo-Nazis today, but the Third Reich does not exist. So in answer to your question, you're never maybe going to eliminate these terrible, toxic ideas, sure. But if you can show that these ideas will not be able to govern a place like Gaza or anywhere in the world, and that their leaders, wherever they are not going to be safe, I think that's a very important deterrent, and it makes it a much less of a threat.
Okay. Briahnna, I want to come back to the numbers point, because I think
I largely agree with that,
it's really important. I'm going to do something which is blatantly going to fail, but I'm going to try anyway, which is ask every single one of you to answer that question very briefly, which is how many civilian casualties do you think there have been in Gaza, and how many Hamas fighters have been killed? And we'll just go around everybody and give me a figure.
I think it's really important to note that
I'll give her credit if she actually is willing to name a number for how much she thinks, how many of the deaths were Hamas militants. I'll give her credit for it if she does. I feel like she won't, but we'll see.
Israel has accepted and verified Hamas's Hamas's numbers routinely over years and years and years, and at no point has the Hamas numbers that have come out in the immediate wake of an incident been revised. Has there been a determination that those numbers were an estimation so that Israel would have to recalibrate its choice to rely on those numbers. When we're talking about, remember we're talking about Hamas numbers.
Just give me the numbers,
wait a minute.
though. Just give me the number.
Hamas is the government. I did a really short opening, so I hope you don't mind if I...
That's kind of your fault, though. I mean, you said you had no opening and you didn't feel like you needed one. So it's a little bit abusive to try to say now that you ought to be able to make a longer statement because you chose to forgo an opening. Like, I mean, that's on you, but...
Fine.
Hamas is the government of Gaza. So in Gaza, the person who picks up your trash from outside of your house is Hamas. The person who runs the hospital and gives you your, childhood vaccine.
Oh, I see the strategy she's going for. She's going to say the number of Hamas killed doesn't matter because all the people that Israel claims are militants aren't militants. They're just like part of the government, and that's it. That's the strategy that we're employing here.
Vaccines or whatever is Hamas. Literally everybody is Hamas, and the Hamas Health Ministry, which has been keeping these numbers, has been relied upon by international organizations and by Israel up until this point, at which it is, I think, inconvenient for Israel to accept these numbers that are very, very high.
Man, I wonder if they're going to bring up the downward adjustment of the numbers. I'm so curious if that'll come up.
These numbers have been stuck at about 34,000 for over a month now because everyone who used to do the counting in the Hamas Health Ministry is dead. The hospitals have all been destroyed. Every hospital in Gaza has been destroyed, partly because of mythology, like the idea that a Hamas headquarters was under Al-Shifa Hospital, which was disproven roundly.
That's not true. None of that was ever disproven. She's just going to say that because there wasn't a James Bond style, James Bond villain's headquarters with sophisticated, 400 monitors all over the screen, she's going to say that it wasn't an actual headquarters. But okay.
It absolutely was.
Brianna, you're entitled to your opinion, but not your own facts.
It was. There was no Hamas headquarters under Al-Shifa Hospital.
Brianna, so
there hasn't been, and there continues not to be.
Let me.
But the consequence
let me just
of
ask
that,
this again, because I asked you about fighters. I asked you about Hamas fighters. So 34,000 total.
What we know is
how many fighters?
3/4 of those are women and children.
So how many of those are fighters?
So even if all of the men were Hamas, which we know there aren't, because, for example, just a month ago...
She's literally not going to answer this question. I feel like she should be instantly kicked out of the debate if she's not willing to give an answer here. She's going to give like a hype. She's going to like, even if all of them were fighters, the number would only be 4,000. Even if every single one was. She's not even going to give her.
We saw the drone footage of an IDF drone tracking and shooting 4 Palestinian children as they were going through the rubble of their own house. I mean, there's innumerable examples of seeing people who are not Hamas being killed.
Okay.
Israel obviously notoriously shot 3 of its own hostages that were stripped down nude trying to get free.
She should just be kicked out for this. She's a deeply unserious person. I hate that she's treated with any level of seriousness. This is Bernie Sanders' fault.
So even if you count whatever the remaining 3/4 as being Hamas, it still remains the case that 3/4 of the 34,000 are women and children.
So how many would you say are fighters?
I rely on the same numbers that everybody else does. I'm saying even worst case scenario.
So what are those numbers?
You're asking me to do math? What's 1/4 of 34?
Well, I don't think all the men who've been killed are
8,000 or so.
Okay. Do you agree?
Oh, okay. Wow, she got there. She was bullied into a number at the end. Nice.
Jake?
It's approximately right. I mean, the numbers that I have, these are the numbers believed by U.S. intelligence. Around 35,000 total killed, 70% women and children. That's 24,500, and then not all the men are going to be Hamas fighters.
Somewhere 8,000. Yeah.
That's the best. Yeah, that's the best number.
I will come back to you guys. Right. Do you agree with those numbers first? I just want to establish this as a baseline.
No, I do not.
No.
Okay. Let me explain. I think a lot of people may have missed the story, but Hamas's own Gaza Ministry of Health revised downward their own casualty estimates about...
Yeah, okay. This is going to be a big one. It's not just also that they revised downward. It's that the percentages of the people who are women and children in those revisions are dramatically different, which is really important. The revisal on its own is a pretty big deal, but the fact that the percentages are so different, that's very hard to explain on the pro-Hamas side.
That's not true. That's not true.
Yes, it is.
No, that's false. What happened is that
He's going to say that what happened is they just decided to get rid of people that they didn't have full information for because all the hospitals were destroyed. But the reality is There are tons of reasons. The biggest one I'll just say is that the percentage of women and children that were on the ones that have been eliminated, that have been discredited, the percentages of women and children in those numbers were way, way, way higher than they were for the dead population. Where now the percentages of adult men are way higher than they would have been before. The percentage difference here is key because he's about to obfuscate with some bullshit.
They said that about 11,000 people did not have all the identifying information. The United States continues to believe the total.
There you go. And also, it's not just that they don't have all the information. The way that they were counting people as being dead, they were just going by like media reports and word of mouth. They didn't even have bodies for these people. So it's not like they blew somebody up and they couldn't identify the bodies. It would just be like, there'd be like a story release, like 200 people killed and whatever. And they're like, oh shit, 200 more people dead. Boom. And they would just write it down. This has all been written about extensively. Don't believe me, go look it up. I'm not going to look up every single thing. But so this, we'll see if the other side has these counter arguments.
Number, that's false.
I don't know that the U.S. government.
I'll put out sources online.
What's your number? Eli, what's your number?
He doesn't know there was a really good, he should read this too, especially if you're a Jew. You want to be a right-leaning Jew. I'm assuming he's Jewish. He doesn't have to be Jewish. Tablet has written at least 2 articles going over how mathematically they think that these deaths are fake. This is a good article. I think this one is worth reading. At the very least, you should be aware of this. But there was another one that was written as well by him.
First of all, let me. I'm not trying to get out of it, and I'm not trying to. But I'm saying I think the most prudent thing to say is that, especially in the fog of war, we don't actually know who was a civilian and who was a fighter, and we usually find out that
there are way better arguments than this. And I don't think he's aware of them. He's not, because he would have brought them up.
These things are wildly different. Just like we hear initial reports of massacres that turn out not to be massacres.
Can you link the article?
We hear initial reports of things that look fine and turn out to be much worse. There's a lot of things that in the heat of a battle, in the heat of a war, we can't possibly know. But I'm comfortable saying that it's telling that some 10,000 or 11,000 people they can't identify doesn't mean, I think that would be reason for some sort of skepticism at that.
True, but the stronger argument is that of those 11,000 people that are not identified, almost all of them were women and children. That's your big killer point. How is it that of the 11,000 revised down numbers, why is it that almost all the people that couldn't be accounted for were women and children? Isn't that strange? It is strange. It's very strange.
That point, considering that is their job. More importantly, I would trust people like John Spencer, who is the expert on urban warfare from West Point, who went and embedded with the IDF and did his own survey, and he says that Israel's standard at this point, or the ratio for how many civilians to fighters that are being killed, is far better than U.S. Performance in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Well, in order to say that, you have to know what the number is, right? To be able to make that claim, you have to know what the number is. So what approximate number is it?
I would say approximately,
you can't
the
say
IDF says around 13,000 fighters are gone. Hamas, I think, has a lower number. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong.
Wow, somebody in chat found the article on this. This is from the 16th of May. Why is the UN citing lower death toll for women and children? And if you scroll down here, they'll tell you here, the figures have been released in different ways by the 2 separate authorities, the GMO and the Health Ministry. And the UN has now switched from quoting the former to the latter to break down demographic data. At the start of the war, the Health Ministry only reported deaths for which details had been registered in hospitals, whereas from November, the GMO included an additional category of deaths recorded in reliable media reports. More recently, the Health Ministry has included these media reports compiled by the GMO, along with an additional category of deaths recorded by family members by filling in an online form. Gaza's Health Ministry is now, therefore, reporting these figures: deaths recorded in hospitals, deaths reported by family members, and deaths from reliable media reports. Some of these, for which information is missing, such as an ID number or date of birth, are included in the overall number of deaths in the Health Ministry figures, but are not broken down demographically. The number of women and children killed is deeply contested because it is often interpreted as an indication of the number of civilian deaths. The GMO is consistently given a higher figure for the proportion of women and children in all fatalities than has the Health Ministry. On the 6th of May, the UN reported 34,735 deaths, of which there were 9,500 women and 14,500 children, citing the GMO as its source. Then 2 days later, the UN released a further report switching its sourcing to the Health Ministry. The result of this was that although the overall recorded death toll was almost unchanged, 34,844, the number of registered deaths of women, 4,959, and children, 7,797, had both fallen significantly. So now you see the number of deaths reported by women went from 9,500 to under 5,000, and children went from 14,500 to under 7,800, right? Significant differences in percentages here. This difference was because those individuals with incomplete information were not included in the demographic breakdown. So it's interesting that the deaths that were reported without any really good backing information for them all happened to be, or basically all of them were, women and children. That's very, very, very sussy baka. Very sussy baka. The GMO says the proportion of women and children killed in the conflict is around 70%. The UN's latest report citing Health Ministry data says out of 24,686 fully identified fatalities, 52% were women and children, 40% were men, and 8% were elderly without specifying whether they were male or female. It isn't clear what age the report considers to be elderly and how it categorizes children. So, for the GMO's figure to be compatible with the Health Ministry's data, almost all of the 10,000 deaths not fully identified by the ministry would have to have been women and children. We asked the GMO why the proportion of women and children they had recorded as killed is so much higher than in the Health Ministry's data, but they did not provide a direct response to the discrepancy. This is a BBC article as well, so it's not like we're on some crazy pro-Zionist website, but...
And then...
Yes. They say 6,000.
And then we have this number between 21,000 and 35,000 of civilians, and it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah,
the number specifically.
Well, I don't have one.
You don't have one?
I have the same information as Briahnna said that everybody here has, but I'll tell you one thing that is relevant. There was a attack on a hospital, very early days.
Ooh, you're talking about Al-Ali on October 13th? October 17th, sorry. This was the J-Dam, the legendary one.
October, everybody remembers this. And we found out later through multiple investigations, multiple journalistic outfits, discovering that it was an errant Islamic Jihad rocket. The initial number...
Oh, I bet the other side is going to cite... There's a pro-Palestinian organization, what were they called, that do an alternative analysis to this, and they reject that. They're the only organization, I believe, that still maintains that it was an errant Iron Dome rocket. I don't remember the name of that. Somebody will say it in chat, but I bet the lefty people are going to cite that. Oh, Forensic Architects. Yeah. I think it's them, yeah.
That was given of civilian dead by the Gaza Ministry of Health was 500 who died in a hospital. 500. Go look this up. And then it was revised down after it was revealed that it was their own
Yes, it was
rocket.
revised down.
I am talking, and you're not going to talk right now. So I'm not Robbie Suave, sorry. So those numbers, and I'll tell you this, like in war, keeping in mind that Dresden, for instance, where I keep seeing this coming up on Twitter, et cetera, the German government determined that the number in Dresden was anywhere from 20 to 30,000 about 15 years ago. I mean, knowing this stuff in real time is very hard, so it's nearly impossible to answer that question without having some kind of knowledge. What I can tell you is I don't trust anybody in this. When I was in Ukraine, right after the war started in Ukraine, I was in a bar, and they had a thing up, the number of jets shot down, number of Russians killed, and it was wildly inflated.
Yeah.
And I was on the side of the Ukrainians. I didn't want to see them be invaded by these heathen Russians, but I was like, I think they're kind of inflating that. So everyone is doing that. So clinging to these numbers as if...
Wait, hold on. Jesus. Oh, hi.
So everyone is doing that. So clinging to these numbers as if the Gaza Ministry of Health, of all people, don't have a vested interest.
What? Oh.
In puffing them up as big as they can is ludicrous.
Okay, so one thing I observe is actually we're not that far off.
Yeah, that's what's incredible. Everyone basically agreed with the numbers.
Yes.
The numbers conversation it's not actually a good question.
None of the four people on stage are familiar with any of the writing or work on these. That's so disappointing. Oh, no. When was this? Well, hi, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and these articles, this one is 3 months old, so it's not even about the recent stuff. Oh, no, none of them are familiar with it. There are so many better, I guess it's pro-Israeli arguments, but whatever. Yeah, there are so many better pro-Israeli arguments here, but...
Well, you started it by saying the ratio.
No, well, the
Wow, Illuminator, thanks for the 5 gifted subs.
ratio,
That was your
the
point.
ratio is important. The total numbers are not important because.
But that's why I'm trying to work out is
Well,
what ratio of fighters to civilians, because you're saying there's too many civilian
Okay, yes,
casualties.
okay, I understand. The ratio is important.
Yeah.
But at the end of this conflict, all of the groups are going to come to approximately equal numbers. This has happened in all of the previous conflicts. Israel's estimates, Gaza's estimates, and the United States' estimates, they're all in about the same place. So like, you know, talking about, oh, they're trying to exaggerate the numbers, so they said 500 or whatever. Yeah, they were wrong when they said that. They revised down, and I'm not even
Were they
necessarily...
wrong
I'm
or
not
they
even
lying?
necessarily...
Just an
or
innocent
maybe
mistake.
The problem with that wasn't that they were wrong, it's that they were completely lying. There's no way 500 people died in that parking lot, number one. And number two, they lied about who caused it. And number three, I don't think that those numbers were revised down from the Al-Ali hospital. I don't think they changed at all. I think it's still included in the Israeli killed death toll. But
or maybe it was
Within
manipulative.
24
Just a
hours, that
whoopsie.
was corrected.
One at a time, one at a time.
within 24 hours, that was corrected? Is that what she just said? Am I being gaslit in real time? I feel like it was days or over a week before that. And that story was a huge story. There are people today, like if you talk to Hassan, he still doesn't believe that story was not true. He'll still tell you that bombing was done by Israel.
Maybe,
Okay.
or maybe it was
Within
manipulative.
24
Just a
hours, that
whoopsie.
was corrected.
One at a time, one at a time.
No, but my point is
It's a
that...
big ratio to get from 500 to 30.
No, it's fine. I agree that Hamas has an incentive to incentivize the number of civilians, and Israel has an incentive to incentivize to maximize the number of combatants. But I'm just saying, after the end of all of these conflicts, they get to the same numbers. They're all around the same place. So this isn't really going to be...
Okay,
And here's
but
the
we
important
agree,
point.
right?
But here's the
Broadly.
important point. Part of why the Hamas health ministry is very good at tracking the deaths is because, and by the way, Israel isn't contesting, apart from for political reasons, took a while for them to start contesting these numbers. It's because Israel knows where every single person in Gaza lives. Gaza is under the control of Israel. It is an occupied territory according to international law. And as a consequence, they know the names and ages and addresses of all the people that have been killed. That is why Palestinians have been able to put up slideshows.
Israel does not know the current location of every single civilian in Gaza. That is not true. I think they have access to administrative data. I think that's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they know where every single civilian is at all points in time. If they did, then there would be no tunnels because they'd know that tunnels are being built constantly in that fucking place. Like,
where you can scroll through, it takes about, I think, 7 minutes to scroll through the names of just the 13,000 children that have been killed with their ages next to their names. These are real people. And so even if you think every adult, including all of the women, were Hamas and deserve to die, I think there's a really important question as to whether or not you think the 13,000 children who have been killed, some of whom we've watched been tracked down and killed by Israeli drone cameras, are the adequate consequences, collateral damage for this allegedly just war.
Okay.
So Brianna, if
where are the children killed by cameras? What is she talking about? Is she mixing it up with the beach bombing like a decade ago? Or what is she talking about there?
the reason that you trust those numbers is because they have the specific information, well, doesn't that also mean that you wouldn't trust numbers that were then, they couldn't say anything, information about this town?
Oh, the 4 unarmed people by the UAV? Are we still assuming those were civilians? Why are we assuming those are civilians? We have no reason to assume that. What would be the...
10 or 11,000?
What are you talking about? I don't understand.
When
the
they
question.
revised their numbers, they said these are people that are part of the totals and we don't have names or anything else with that.
Corroborating evidence is what I'm describing. So for a lot of the deaths,
Okay, and I'm
they're
saying
able
you
to...
don't have any corroborating
Israel
evidence.
provides
There is no corroborating evidence. That's a lie. Oh, does anybody here not know how the death totals are figured out?
For a third of
One at a time. One at a
Can
time.
you respond to the 13,000 children and whether or not you think that they're
I'm happy to
appropriate
respond to the
collateral
13,000 children.
damage?
Can you respond to whether or not
You
you still
haven't
think...
done so yet.
What?
Can you respond? You said
Okay,
you're
well,
happy
you
to
haven't
respond, but
answered
you
my
haven't.
question. You just told me
I asked
that
the question
the
first,
reason that
Eli.
you trust the numbers is because they've painstakingly
That's not
given
what I said.
the names and the ages.
No.
Yes, you did. We
I
all
said
heard it.
one. I said one of the
One
reasons.
of them.
in every
And then
other
I
comment.
asked you
Okay,
if that's
all right,
the
all
case.
right, all right,
They
why
all
don't
end
you-
up the same
Stop.
at the
Everybody
end in
stop.
every other
Everybody
one.
stop. Everybody stop.
Wait a minute.
Everybody stop.
Why is she doing the Finkel hand?
I said
Everybody
one,
stop.
I said
Briahnna.
one of the reasons, one of the many reasons that you can
Okay.
come to trust the numbers is because there are these records that can corroborate many of the deaths. Moreover, I would point to other instances, for example, the fact
Then how do you explain the downward adjustment of like 12,000 people?
that a CNN investigation showed that Israel has desecrated 16 cemeteries in Gaza since this conflict started.
Okay.
Is
We're
Hamas
getting-
under the cemetery? At what point do we acknowledge that this is an effort to destroy a community so that no one ever wants to return and ethnically cleanse them out of Gaza permanently?
Okay, cool. So we'll
Then why did they evacuate Rafah to the north? Why didn't they push them all into the Sinai? How long ago was the Rafah evacuation?
we'll leave that part there because one of the interesting things is actually everybody agrees on the numbers, broadly speaking,
Well, Michael Gardner, thanks for the 5 gifted subs.
and yet we're having this debate about it from a perspective of everybody actually agreeing on the numbers. So you brought up the ratio, right, which is why I've been honing in on the numbers point.
Yeah.
So the ratio is about 1 to 5, broadly speaking, right?
It depends, which is what I was talking about earlier with the AI program.
1 to 5? If they're saying 8,000 militants are killed and the total death count is like 30,000, that's like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, 1 to 3 at the most, no?
That I'll let him answer.
Yeah, so that's where we are. Now, on that basis, why, and I'm going to ask them an equally annoying question for their side, but what should Israel have done in response? And please, we've had this discussion so many times on my show, when you ask somebody, what should Israel have done? And they say, not this. And they won't ever say what Israel should have done.
I'm
okay?
happy to answer that.
And I will.
Yeah.
What should Israel have done in response to October 7th?
So targeted, very, very targeted strikes against actual Hamas targets.
What do you think they were doing? Just like blowing up apartments for fun?
That do not let this much civilian casualties. Somebody in the audience is laughing, so let me point out a little piece of detail about that.
Oh God, he's about to start rambling off the like propaganda numbers, or just he's just gonna say numbers. I don't know. 50% of homes are destroyed. 80% of people are unable to drink. Well, it's gonna be like bullshit, but maybe not. I'm sorry. What is he gonna do?
So Israeli intelligence sources have leaked that 2,000-pound bombs, these are dumb bombs that are not precision, they're cheaper munitions.
Calling a bomb dumb or not is I don't know why. I don't know if it was Jank. I know he did this in our debate. This talking point of like dumb bomb versus smart bomb is largely fucking retarded. Okay, just because a dumb bomb doesn't have, you know, like post-launch guidance mechanisms. There's better words for this. I don't remember what the terms are. When you have when you've got services for navigation after you've launched a weapon, just because you don't have the ability to like change the trajectory mid-flight doesn't mean that they're just randomly shot into a place, right? Like a plane can, with a high level of precision, depending on circumstances, depending on their weaponeering, like type of weapon used and what you're hitting, a plane can deliver a bomb with a high level of precision. Just because the bomb doesn't have like secondary trajectory changes or whatever. So this obsession over like dumb bombs and smart bombs is like just really fucking stupid. Like,
Pound bombs, these are dumb bombs that are not precision, they're cheaper munitions. They're not being used to uncover tunnels, as the PR agents have said. But to kill individual junior level militants in their apartment buildings, okay?
that doesn't, people, first of all, just Palestinians don't live like that, okay? Families tend to live in very, very large communities with lots of families living under the same roof. They tend to live pretty close together, number one. Number two, Hamas doesn't operate this way. They're never gonna just be in a room alone. What is this? You're like showing you're demonstrating a lack of understanding of like the culture, the region, and the military tactics, like all in one go. Like what a stupid, like, oh, you need to be individually targeting the guy who's sitting alone in his apartment. I thought you said yourself that this is the most densely populated region in the world, even ignoring cultural military strategy. What are you talking about?
You kill individual junior level militants in their apartment buildings, okay? And thus, in lines with the rule of engagement where they can kill 20 civilians to kill a single suspected junior militant, to kill all the civilians who live there. Nearly half of Israeli munitions dropped on Gaza are imprecise dumb bombs. So this is terrible.
A bullet is dumb. Artillery is dumb. Anything without like the ability to change the trajectory in air is dumb. That doesn't mean it's not precise. I'm willing to bet, I could say this openly, I'm sure it's true. I'm willing to bet that there are some smart weapons that have worse guidance systems and aiming abilities than some dumb weapons launched from incredibly smart platforms. I bet that's the case. I'm sure there are guided cruise missiles and shit or whatever that like when launched and given their ability to maneuver and track targets or whatever are probably less precise than dumb bombs launched from like F-35s that are, have like fucking 50 million different, analyses and mathematical equations that are being calculated like guide dumb bombs. Like it's such a stupid distinction to make.
Okay, so you can, I hate Hamas, I want to get rid of Hamas. The second thing you need to do is actually resurrect the peace process, because what we've seen at every point in history is that if when the Palestinians feel that they're...
Don't you criticize Hamas for using dumb bombs? No, I don't, you fucking retard. I criticize Hamas for using weapons that don't have any aiming whatsoever from the time of launch. The problem with the rockets that come out of the Gaza Strip is they don't have any aiming whatsoever. They're just shot at cities. That's it. Israel's not randomly shooting bombs into the fucking Gaza Strip. If that was the case, there'd be hundreds of thousands of civilians dead, and the ratios would be way different than they are right now.
There is a real path towards peace. They moderate, the hatred decreases, and the violence stops. This is how the second Intifada ended. So the second Intifada ended with a resurrection of the peace process, okay? And since the end of the second Intifada, Fatah has not engaged in...
What was the peace wait, what is he referring to? What was the peace process that ended the second Intifada? I thought the second Intifada basically ended with unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip. When did Annapolis start? But those talks didn't even... was that 2007 or 2006? It was 2007, end of 2007. The Annapolis peace thing is what led to Olmert in 2008 making an offer to Abbas. Second Intifada. What peace process ended the second Intifada in 2005? Many consider the Sharm el-Sheikh summit of 2005 to have ended the uprising, as President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister agreed to take definitive steps to de-escalate the hostilities. Nothing really happened. There was no actual agreements were discussed. I think it was both of them were probably just saying, yeah, they reaffirmed their commitment to the roadmap for peace that had been proposed in 2003. Oh, and Sharon released some prisoners. I don't think there was there were no real peace talks that happened after 2005. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm. I keep saying maybe I missed something. I did miss something.
Violent terrorism. Okay, so there's not of the peace process. Okay, and since the end of the second Intifada, Fatah has not engaged in violent terrorism.
Why are we bringing up Fatah here? We're talking about Hamas. What do they have to do with anything? Or I don't understand what the. Okay, so there's that. And then there was also the Oslo Accords in the 90s, which ended when the peace process didn't feel like it was working towards anything that was going to be successful, because Clinton required to Arafat that he waive the right of return, not limit the right of return. I'm talking about Palestinians who were ethnically cleansed from their home, expelled. Okay? That's not true. When they ask for the right of return, they're not only asking about people that were expelled in 48, they're also talking about all of their descendants, married family, and everything as well.
Benny Morris counts 24 massacres that happened in Palestine. And these include areas where at least 150,000 were pure expulsion. in the Nakba, okay, of a total of 750,000. And then many, many others who fled in fear and all sorts of other things. But
Ooh, careful. Benny Morris would actually say that more, I think he would say more than 150,000 were expelled. That, what he just gave there is a Zionist talking point. I don't even know how much he's aware of anything. He just he quietly admitted that the vast majority of the Nakba were not expelled from their towns, but they just fled. They just ran away. That's a Zionist talking point. I believe that most pro-Palestinians are going to argue, sourcing Benny Morris's works, that the majority of them, over 500,000 or 600,000 of the Palestinians that fled their villages in '48, were doing so in response to military pressure or attacks on their cities or villages. The fact that he just said that 600,000 just ran because they were afraid, that's a really big. I don't know who the knows anything about their time right here, but that was just funny that you just said that.
Large portion was actively expelled, and there are Palestinian refugees that are still actually alive from back then that can point to you exactly where their home was. They can point to you exactly where their home was, or their children are alive, or their grandchildren are alive, and they can point exactly to where their family's home was.
Okay.
Homes that often those families lived on for generations, okay?
That's probably not as true, but maybe, okay.
And that land was expropriated after the war and given to Jewish owners. Golda Meir lived in a house that was stolen from a Palestinian Christian and given to her, okay?
Okay. So just come back with me to what Israel should have done.
Targeted strikes that don't hit civilians and resurrecting the peace process.
Okay, Briahnna, what should Israel have done?
I think you're right. I think Jake's right that it's really important to answer the question of what Palestinians want to answer the question of what Israel should do in the wake of October 7. And I think pointing to the fact that, half the population of Gaza today are the
children.
The actual people are the descendants of the 700,000 who were purged, ethnically cleansed from the land that is now called Israel and the Nakba. So I'm sure many of you can imagine from the actual people are the descendants of the 700,000 who were purged, ethnically cleansed from the land that is now called Israel and the Nakba. So I'm sure many of you can imagine what you would do in that sort of a scenario. If when your grandparents were young and your parents were their children in their house, they had been chased out of wherever you live, 13 Pine Drive or whatever, and you were forced to move a state over in a refugee camp. That's constructively what Gaza is. It's a refugee population of 2.3 million people. And you can look over there. You are close enough, you can Google Maps if you have Google.
And I'm going to put this to them. I'm going to put this question to them, but what should Israel have done?
That there's a family that's literally living in a house that
it's all propaganda. She's worthless politically. It sucks that these people she's not even a good spokesperson for the Palestinians. God, I want to do one of these debates from the pro-Palestinian side so bad. It's just all dog shit. This is all stupid. It's just stupid emotional. But I say stupid, but it works. People like emotional points. She's popular. She has a big podcast, so.
Might still have keys to, tending olive groves that were your family's line of business if they haven't cut those all down. And so the people who have had that experience, as you can imagine if you were in their shoes, are never going to let up, wanting to have the right to return to their homes.
Yeah, welcome to the end of World War II. There are tons of people been expelled from homes that have given up the right to go back to any of those places. That has happened in lots of places in the world, but...
This is not a kind of 2,000 years ago sort of a dream. This is
Are there
in
lots
my
of Pakistanis
lifetime.
who want to return to India?
In my lifetime.
That's one of them.
You've purged me from my literal home where I have keys to, and then now it's being occupied by someone who maybe immigrated from Europe, maybe immigrated from Brooklyn, and that injustice really hits home. On top of that, you've been denied the right to have any kind of state, a passport, an airport, a country, the kind of things that constitute a country, right? Joe Biden is now spending your tax dollars building a port in Israel, in Gaza rather, because Gaza isn't allowed to have those kinds of infrastructure, basic infrastructure projects on its own. So what absolutely needs to be done is for there to be a right of return for the people who were purged out of Israel.
So Briahnna, just so I understand.
And all of their descendants, and all of their new married families, and all the adopted children, and all that, everyone else, right? Yeah.
You think that Israel's response to October 7th would have been to build Gaza an airport. Is that right?
Is that what you think I just said?
Sounds kind of similar to it, yeah. What did you say? What should the response have been? Because you didn't say anything else.
You have some serious listening comprehension issues, Eli.
Oh, then ask her again. Wait, so I'm sorry. So then what should Israel have done?
If you think that that's what
You just yapped for 5 minutes, so what should Israel have done?
said.
No, I'm trying to get it. You just gave a long.
I can slow it down for you and say it
eloquent
again if you're struggling
soliloquy.
to understand, Eli.
I'm
Would you
not
like me to say
struggling
it for you
understand
again?
anything, Brianna.
Okay.
I'm asking you. You were asked what Israel should have done,
Yeah, what should they do? Ask her again. Please, Konstantin, please make her answer the question. What should they have done?
and you gave a long soliloquy about how Gaza doesn't have infrastructure.
As the
Yeah.
moderator,
So I'm
I
asking,
do
is
agree
that
with
what
Thank you.
think
Thank
Israel
you.
should
Yeah,
have
make her
done in
answer.
response
You
to
haven't
October
answered my
7th?
question, which is fine.
The right of return. Do you not know what the right of return is?
So after October 7th, they should have allowed 6 million Palestinians to move back to Israel proper. That should have been the response.
In response,
I know all
Palestinians have
about
to
the
be
right of
allowed-
return.
hold on, let me do my job.
Yeah.
So, in response to October 7th, Israel should have instituted the right of
I
return.
mean, long before October 7th.
No, come on. Answer the question. What do you mean long before? No, the question is in response to this, what should they have done?
But there's
After
gonna
October
be no,
7th.
there's going to be no peace until Palestinians have been
She's not gonna. She barely engages with it. She barely can engage with reality.
granted the right of return. Yes, that's right.
We're talking about this particular war, and we're asking if it's a just war.
Yeah, look, I think there's a world in which people kind of intrinsically understand a kind of Old Testament eye for an eye sensibility.
I'm going to put this all to them.
Sure.
I'm asking you,
I'm
after October 7th,
What should they have done?
what should Israel have done? It's a fair question.
I'm literally answering.
You have not answered my question.
Like I was saying, I think
Intrinsically, there's an Old Testament. What are you talking about?
there's an idea that there's an eye for an eye situation after October 7th immediately, where a certain number of people needed to be killed, Hamas needed to be targeted, there needed to be a reaction, right? I can understand
Okay.
that. But
Should they have done it? Not I can understand it. This is a Hassan thing. When you're like, oh, well, I get that, or maybe I wouldn't have done it, or I blah, blah, blah. Like, we're not asking if you can understand it. That's not within the question.
First week of the siege after October 7th, more bombs
were dropped on children than have been dropped in the past 20 years of fucking war, blah, blah, blah. Like, bro, Jesus Christ.
were dropped on Gaza, a 25-mile strip by 5 miles wide, then were dropped on Afghanistan in 1 year of war.
we get it.
Okay, let me try a different way. Do you agree with Jake?
And very quickly, the number of...
And she's like cutting him off to yap on, again, like a non-answer. She's not answering anything.
Palestinians that have been killed double, triple, quadruple the number that had been killed on October 7th. So the question is much less than what's been done. Almost immediately there was a retribution in a kind of Old Testament way. And
Really? You think they were indiscriminately targeting in the same way that Hamas did on October 7th?
everything beyond that, I see very little moral justification for.
Okay.
So she has no answer. So there's no answer.
Now, you guys, I hope you answer my questions.
Wow. Thanks for
We
having
got
us.
there, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that. We did get there.
You didn't. We didn't get there, but okay.
I'm not being about it. One of the biggest arguments about October 7th is that what do you expect oppressed people to do? If you're living in the situation that Briahnna and Jake are describing, if your family's been moved from their homes, if they see daily violence, if all of this stuff is going on, what do you expect those people to do? Now, this isn't in any way to obviously justify October 7th, but isn't the behavior of Israel going to continue leading to these sorts of atrocities and this endless war that never ends?
Well, I mean, to answer your question,
Yeah.
if you go back to 1936, the first time that the Yishuv, before there was a Jewish state, responded to the Peel Commission was to accept partition of the land. The response from the Arabs was known as the Arab riots, which were quite destructive. Move forward a little bit more to 1947, there's a UN partition plan. Guess what? David Ben-Gurion and the Yishuv, before there's a state of Israel, accepts it. The Arabs do not. 48, they declare independence, but only in the area that was allotted by the partition. But not only did the Palestinians declare war, but so did every other Arab state for the most part.
Technically, the Palestinian to Israeli war happened before the Declaration of Independence, number one. And number two, technically, Israel ultimately ended up expanding outside of the borders of the 47 partition. They took a little bit more land, but it was minor quibbles. But
Declare war in 1948. Moving on, 1967, all the Arabs again attack Israel. Israel wins. They get a lot of territory. In many
The Arabs
ways,
did not
the
attack
antecedents-
Israel in 1967. Israel
What?
he's going to say that Israel did the preemptive strike for no reason because they actually wanted all the territory. This is a much longer conversation than what is going to be provided by any side here that has that anybody has time for. But okay.
started that. Israel started the 1967
Oh,
war.
it did?
Israel started the war is such a reductionally fucking retarded take. Again, you instantly know that there's no understanding or knowledge of history or anything whatsoever. I don't know who this guy is. It's like Dumb and Dumber for these debates. They could have at least paired it with somebody that had some understanding of at least like some of the raw facts. But I guess this is the best that this side can do for these debates. But Destiny, he said Israel declared independence in the partition territories of 48. I don't remember Israel declaring any territory in 48. You can link me that or you can show me that, but I don't remember them declaring any territory. I just remember them declaring independence. And then the territory that they ended up going for was about the partition planned area and then a little bit further outside of those bounds. But maybe they did declare exact territory, but I don't remember that.
False statement.
Okay.
Have you ever heard
Israel started that. Israel started the 1967
Oh,
war.
it did?
That's a false statement.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Gamal Abdel Nasser? Come on, man.
Well,
Listen,
I'm aware
this
who
is-
Gamal Abdel Nasser is. I'm aware he was building up troops on the border. I'm also
Do you aware that, like, every
I'm
other
also
day he was
aware
saying,
that-
"I'm gonna destroy Israel"?
I'm also, excuse me.
Come
I'm
on.
also aware he didn't start it. Israel started it.
Okay.
And U.S. intelligence's
sorry.
assessment
Where
was
two
that
Arab armies are
US
massed on Israel's
intelligence's
border.
So the answer isn't just that Nasser deployed troops along the Sinai. The deployment of those troops followed the expulsion of the UN peacekeeping force that was put there after. Eli didn't mention the war in 56. That after the Suez Crisis in 56, the UN had their own peacekeeping troops that were along the Sinai to make sure that there wouldn't be conflict between the two states. And Egypt expelled those troops before deploying their own army along the Sinai. They didn't just deploy troops, they expelled peacekeeping troops first. But
And U.S. intelligence's assessment
where
was
two
that
Arab armies are
US
massed on Israel's
intelligence's
border,
assessment
and their
was
leaders
that
are yelling and
Egypt was
screaming about
not
how they're
going
going
to
to
start
destroy
the
the
war.
Jews and
They
run all the
passed
Jews
this
into the sea.
information
Yeah,
on
okay, all right.
U.S. intelligence assessment also said that there probably wouldn't be a war in 73 either. But I mean, there was a surprise attack then. So I mean, like that's not a compelling argument. But again, this is like dumb history on everybody's side. But
And
And
finish.
they invaded anyway.
He didn't interrupt you. Don't interrupt him. Why is
Okay.
this so f***ing difficult?
Jesus.
Sitting over here quiet as you guys speak. Let us talk.
Anyway,
Fucking hell.
after 1967,
Damn. Why does it seem that the moderators of these large debates always pull back so fast when the interlocutor bitches about pushback from the moderators? I don't know.
the first response from Israel was, all right, let's negotiate. And then they were greeted with what is known as the three no's. Now, fortunately, better leadership did come along. There was another war in 1973, we all know, and the Egyptians made peace, and then the Jordanians made peace, and other Arab states have largely gotten out of the maybe we can just destroy Israel business. The last stand here of the people who are still rejecting any possible partition are the Palestinians. And the Palestinians continue to start wars, which they hope will eliminate Israel, lose those wars, and then say, oh my, we're the victims. I want to go back to 1948. 1948, again, was not a war.
This is kind of a one-sided telling of history, but it's mostly kind of correct. A little one-sided, but mostly correct.
That the Jewish state started. It was a war that the Jewish state finished as part of its independence. Now, there were all kinds of population movements and transfers throughout the 1940s, as we all know.
There was Greek and Turkey was a huge one. India and Pakistan was a huge one. After World War II, there were tons of Germans expelled from all sorts of European states. I feel like I read the number of that was like 15 or 16 million people. Is that true? Germans expelled Europe after World War II. That seems like way too big a number. Some 14 million Germans fled or were ejected from what is cities? Poland, Russia, the Czech Republic, Hungary, the Baltic States. Oh, okay, so yeah. From 44 to 48, at least 12 million Germans were expelled from Eastern Europe and resettled. Okay, damn. So it was a huge, huge, huge number, yeah.
But the only group of people that has its own special UN organization to basically treat the great-grandchildren of original refugees as if they have this so-called right of return are the Palestinians. We don't hear anything about Kashmiris wanting to go to India or various ethnic Germans wanting to go back to their homes in Poland or any number of things. Millions of people in this period. The only people we care about is the Palestinians.
So what should they do? What should Palestinians do, in your opinion?
Stop starting wars with Israel and losing.
Can I just
If they had good history on the other side, you say stop starting wars and losing, then they would say, oh, well, what started the Oslo Accords? Oslo 1 was a response to Oslo I was a response to the first Intifada, the Stone Intifada. We didn't even get the Palestinian Authority or recognition of a state until we actually had a violent uprising to force Israel to pay attention to us. The recognition of the PLO or Palestinians as a state arguably follows, from the 70s and onwards, like PLO terrorism, or offers made. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Would Palestinians say it was a success for disengagement from the Gaza Strip in 2005? Maybe not. But yeah, you can argue that violence is ultimately what gets them attention, which is true, which is a huge fault from Israel. Why? On October 7th now we're talking about peace again, whereas before it was the Abraham Accords that also ignored all of the Palestinians, right? The Abraham Accords completely ignored them. Well, now we're talking about peace again because violence happened. The reason why, and I see this brought up in chat a lot, why is it that the Palestinians support Hamas? Why do the Palestinians support Hamas? The reason why the Palestinians support Hamas is because when Hamas does shit, people start talking about what should happen. That's why Hamas has support. Palestinians view the PA as a toothless entity that's not going to further their cause towards any final state. They don't feel that way. They feel like the Palestinian Authority is involved in maintaining the status quo and serving Israeli interests and basically being a buffer between the Palestinians and any final peaceful solution. That's why they generally will support Hamas. Maybe they don't necessarily like terrorism. Maybe they don't necessarily like women being raped or children being killed, but at least Hamas is moving the conversation forward. That's why Palestinians generally support Hamas over the PA.
But what about I think it's a fair point that they're not living in the best conditions.
No, they're not living in the best conditions.
Right?
And by the way, there have been gazillions of dollars of international development aid to Gaza. But guess what? It's stolen by their horrific and terrible leaders. And it's not just Hamas, who are these fanatic dirtbags, which we all know what they did on October 7th. It's also the Palestinian Authority. They are so incredibly corrupt. They pocket it for themselves. And the only way that they are able to constantly kind of hold on to power.
The poor PA. Everybody hates the PA. The Palestinians hate the PA. The PA hates the PA. Other parties in the PLO hate the PA. And Hamas hates the PA, obviously. Israelis hate the PA. Everybody just seems to hate the PA.
Is by poisoning the minds of their population and making them think that they can destroy a thriving Jewish state that's there when Israel has in Oslo, under Ehud Olmert, and I'm telling you, if there was a Palestinian leader that said, okay, let's do it, let's do the partition, I guarantee you the Israelis would be fine with it and we could get it done. But that's the problem. The problem is the Palestinians still want it all and they just have to let it go. It's a dangerous delusion.
In what way is that not a boss?
Why what?
Do you want to say something before I go to
In what way is that not a boss?
Why is that not a boss? I don't understand what he's saying.
And we could get it done. But that's the problem. The problem is the Palestinians still want it all, and they just have to let it go. It's a dangerous delusion.
In what way is that not a boss?
Oh, in what way is that not a boss? Well, then the direct response is, why did Abbas say no to Olmert's peace offering in 2008? That's the direct response to that. I've never heard a good reason given.
Did you want to say something before I go to Michael?
The irony is that that's almost...
Oh, he should add, that's Eli. One of these two should have said that. Oh, there's so much. Watching these is so frustrating now. Oh my God, there's so much more to say on both sides. That's the response. Why did Abbas say no in 2008?
The opposite of what's true. It's been widely reported.
Is it almost the opposite of what's true?
Let her say.
Wait a minute, Eli.
Eli, you just cried so hard about her interrupting you, which was fair, but now you can't just go ahead and interrupt her right after. Bro, she's about to lean into that so hard.
There was a lot of screaming and hollering about interruption, so I just want to know what the standards are before I continue.
Guys, let me do the moderating and you do the debating, okay? So say your piece.
Bibi Netanyahu was caught delivering suitcases of cash to Hamas. He's so invested in funding Hamas and Hamas being in power in Gaza. And
that's such a... So Netanyahu was willing to allow money to continue to flow into the Gaza Strip that was coming from Qatar, but whether or not that was good or bad is a more detailed conversation than just Netanyahu was creating or supporting Hamas. That's a very reductive way of viewing that relationship.
The reason is, Israel needs to be able to rely on the argument that the political power that Palestinians have is so radical, is so right-wing, is so hateful that there cannot be no negotiation. So he has worked to undermine the Palestinian Authority. He worked to undermine more moderate politicians that Palestinians have nominated over the years, have put forward over the years. And as early as this past week, as the International Criminal Court has looked into issuing warrants for Israelis who have committed war crimes, what has been his response? His response has been to threaten not Hamas or anything going on in Gaza, but to threaten to do more war crimes in the West Bank if he or any other members of his administration are charged with any of these ICC warrants.
I don't even know what she's referring to here. Probably some unhinged statement he made. Maybe, I'm not even sure what she was referring to there, but.
There has been a repeated effort.
Also, the ICC has also issued warrants for, did they issue these or were they asking for these? I think they were, no, these are the warrants that were requested. They haven't been issued yet, but they were requesting warrants also for Haniyeh, the head of it's Politburo, right? For Hamas, basically the leader of Hamas. It's Haniyeh, it was Sinwar, who is considered the leader of the Gaza Strip, and it was, is it Mohammed Daif, who is the leader? Is he the military leader of the Al-Qassam Brigades? Hold on, I need to remember these names. Is it Al-Qassam Brigades? Yes. Okay. I wonder, did they mention it all on the? She mentions one set of. And also, the only reason the ICC has jurisdiction is because the Palestinians wanted the ICC to have jurisdiction. So it's extra funny if Hamas leadership doesn't submit themselves to the ICC, but then expects Israeli leaders to. But
to punish the most moderate Palestinians, because otherwise he would be forced to make a case for why he doesn't think that people who are literally from what is now described as Israel cannot return home. And the real reason why they cannot allow people to have the right to return is because there's a commitment to it being not just a pluralistic state like the one we live in, where we're very proud of having people from all over the world who found freedom from religious persecution, and you can live however you want to live. To be clear, in the United States, we do not allow unlimited immigration by any group of people. That is not true. Immigration is capped in total 7% from any individual country per year. We would never allow in the United States 150 million people from another country to come here and immigrate at one point in time. That's not you. Even for U.S. immigration policy, we would never agree to that. And practice whatever religion you want to practice, that they specifically want it to be a Jewish ethno-state. And if you were to allow the approximately 5 million or so Palestinians that live in the West Bank and in Gaza to be a part of contiguous Israel, they would lose a religious majority and lose the ability. They don't care about the religious majority. They care about the ethnic majority because of the ethnic protections. That's what they care about. It's the ethnic part that's important there, not necessarily any religious thing. You could have a pluralistic, progressive state, but it would no longer be a Jewish ethno-state. Okay. The Jewish ethno-state doesn't really apply. When you talk about an ethno-state, generally they're talking about a country that doles out different rights to different ethnic groups. Controlling your immigration and deciding who you allow to come to the country isn't necessarily along the same lines as an ethno-state. The Palestinians that live in Israel more or less have the same legal rights as the Jewish people that live in Israel, or the different groups of Jews or other types of Bedouin Druze or whatever, generally have the same legal rights and protections. It's why in the Knesset you've got Palestinian elected people. That's why I think there's an Islamist party that has one member that's seated in the Knesset right now. So to call it an ethno-state because of their immigration policies, it doesn't map on very cleanly. It's trying to project like a Western understanding of the world onto a country that doesn't really work right now.
Can I respond to that?
I
follow the news very closely. I don't remember Netanyahu's "we promised to do war crimes in the West Bank" speech, but okay.
Hi, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. A lot of people will criticize Israel for like its immigration policies and shit, or border walls and all this kind of crap. Like, I mean, so many other developed nations have a lot of these same practices. If you look at Quebec in Canada, a lot of white nationalist neo-Nazis actually use Quebec as an example of how Canada as a whole should handle immigration, because Quebec has a special protected class in Canada where it's its most important minority, and they actually allow Quebec to not allow immigrants from certain countries to come in, so they can actually deny people coming in from like Africa, for instance, if they want to, on that basis alone, just so that they can protect their like cultural identity and keep most of the province French. So if you're gonna criticize Israel for doing some of these things, like not allowing people to immigrate in from certain Muslim nations, I mean, are they gonna claim that Canada, Quebec specifically, is an apartheid state? Kind of retarded.
No. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add that, and you should feed your cats vegan.
Gotcha.
But take care.
Bye. Somebody said almost no Arab Israelis identify as Palestinian at all. Only 7%. Arab Israelis are not the Palestinians. The reason why I use this term now is because my understanding is completely the opposite of that. I mean, I didn't talk to every single person in Israel, but my understanding is the vast majority of them consider themselves Palestinians that have Israeli citizenship in Israel. So that's why I've been using the term Palestinian Israelis instead of Arab Israelis. I think the vast majority of them consider themselves to be Palestinians in terms of ethnicity, and then Israelis in terms of citizenship. But okay.
I don't remember.
Is there a poll for that? I have no idea. This is just coming from people I spoke with.
Netanyahu's "We promised to do war crimes in the West Bank" speech, but okay.
What are you talking about? Who said anything about his speech?
You just said it, Briahnna. You just said he promised to do more war crimes in the West Bank. I'm just basically quoting you back to you. Anyway, more importantly, I wanted to say Netanyahu did not deliver suitcases full of cash. He arranged for the Qataris to give development aid to Hamas because no one in Europe, for good reason, no one in America for good reason, wanted to actually have the, dirty up their hands by giving various kinds of money to a humanitarian group. But given the fact that they were the sovereigns of Gaza, someone needed to provide for basic infrastructure.
It's UNRWA.
That's what happened.
Hold on.
That's what happened. That's what happened. And it wasn't Netanyahu's.
Hold on.
Eli is more correct than he's more correct than she is, but again, this is kind of a one telling. It is true. Netanyahu didn't want to see the entire Gaza Strip become completely defunded or fall into chaos, although essentially that's what's happened. But Netanyahu also did see advantages in terms of keeping Hamas poised against the PA as well. So it's kind of like a dual purpose thing. Eli's only telling one side of that story there, but
Hold on.
That's what happened. That's what happened, and it wasn't Netanyahu's policy. This is a myth that lots of people believe that Netanyahu did this for some cynical reason. He did it because the entire rest of the civilized world, like the United States, was saying you have to figure out some way to get some development aid into Gaza, even though I understand that no other groups really want to, except for Qatar, of course, wants to deal with Hamas.
Is the PA/PLO active in Gaza at that point? No. So even asking people in Israel to explain this is complicated, okay? You have something called the PLO, and the PLO is basically a big conglomerate of different Palestinian parties. Under the PLO, you've got the big boy here is Fatah. This is like your largest party of the PLO. You've also got other parties as well, like the DFLP, the PFLP. This is like the Palestinian PFLP. The DFLP is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The PFLP is the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine, I think. And there are other smaller parties that are under the PLO. Then you've got another thing called the PA. The PA is the Palestinian Authority. This is the governing body that was the administrative body that was created by Israel in the Oslo Accords that governs Palestine. It was supposed to be all of Palestine, but right now it's just the the Popular Front, maybe, sorry. But it's just the West Bank right now, right? So ideally, Hamas was supposed to be part of, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are supposed to be part of like the PLO. But I think right now the PA, I believe it's only basically controlled by people from Fatah. It's not controlled by the PLO, I think. So the PA is like an administrative thing that does like policing and security and pays people to work in the government or whatever for the West Bank. Fatah is the largest party under the PLO. So people will kind of use these interchangeably, the PLO or Fatah, although the PLO contains other parties. And then Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are the two big parties in the Gaza Strip. Oof, okay. So how is allowing the aid from Qatar to go to Gaza supporting Hamas against the PLO? Well, because technically the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority more specifically, should have administrative control over the Gaza Strip. Hamas shouldn't. It should be the PA. And as long as Hamas remains strong, Hamas stands in opposition. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as long as these two parties are strong, these parties stand in opposition to Fatah and the PLO. This is why they'll push for it. They say, oh, well, we want elections. We want there to be new elections. And Mahmoud Abbas, who is the president of he's the chairman of Fatah. No, he's the chairman of the PLO. Abbas is, I believe. Let me double check real quick. Abbas, I think is of, let me check. Yes, he's the chairman of the PLO, and he's the president of the PA. When people say Palestinian National Authority, that's the same thing as PA. PNA, PA is the same thing. But the Hamas thinks that if they hold elections again, that they'll win, and that they can be, they'll either be like the new chairman people of the PLO, and then they get to run the PA, and yeah. But, okay. What caused Gaza to split from PA jurisdiction? My history is a little rough around the edges here, but I believe in 2005, I believe that elections were held, 2007? Elections were held, and because of the way the elections were done, Hamas ends up winning a majority of the seats for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They have a majority of the seats in the PLO, and Hamas had a history of violence, and neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians nor the Americans liked that. So Fatah was looking for ways around Hamas control in the Gaza Strip. Hamas basically ends up kind of realizing this, and then they basically coup and start killing and throwing out all the competing parties in the Gaza Strip. And then they're basically two separate entities from that point forward. The PLO and the PA basically only exist over in the West Bank now, and then Hamas and Islamic Jihad are the two big parties in the Gaza Strip. And they're basically separated at this point. But, okay. What caused Gaza to split is Hamas turned to the PA and the PLO politicians and involuntary bungee jumpers from every, oh, okay.
Hamas. It wasn't because, oh wow, we really like Hamas launching rockets at our country every 6 months. Come on.
So
this
you
is like
can't
it's
have it
just
both ways, Eli.
even though I understand that no other groups really want to, except for Qatar, of course, wants to deal with Hamas. It wasn't because, oh wow, we really like Hamas launching rockets at our country every 6 months. Come on.
So
this
You
is like
can't
it's
have it
just
both
got
ways,
banned.
Eli.
I want to let Michael.
You just finished
gonna
saying-
answer a question.
Guys, I've given you both. I'll come back to you in a second.
Michael, you want to add
No,
anything?
I have it in front of
the
me.
mistake
I
was
read
my
it.
mother
I need
taught me
to
to be
ask
polite,
Michael a
and that was
question, and I'll come back to it.
Just that he-
Please, it's two sentences.
Just, yeah.
Two sentences. I'm going to hold you
This
to
is
that.
the
Get the papers out.
Netanyahu. This is the Netanyahu quote. You can judge if.
Let me do the moderating. I'll take care of it. Two
He's
sentences.
accurate.
People love this Netanyahu quote, but they'll never read from what's before or after. It's a translated article, I think, from Haaretz that's talking about a leaked conversation where Netanyahu is talking to other Likud party members about him basically bragging about keeping Hamas strong and undermining the... well, actually, we can just find this. Netanyahu, Haaretz, quote, Likud party meeting. Fuck, I'm not going to be able to find this full... Does anybody have a link to this article? I don't think I saved it because this is before we started using Obsidian. Can I find the full story? I'd originally read it was translated from Hebrew. You can. I wish I could find a larger part, but you can even tell that in reading this that it's not quite like, oh, we just want to prop up Hamas. It's like that's like an added benefit. But you can read. Even reading this, right? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended Israel's regular allowing of Qatari funds to be transferred into Gaza, saying it's part of a broader strategy to keep Hamas and the Palestinian Authority separate, a source in Monday's Likud faction meeting said. Netanyahu explained that, in the past, the PA transferred the millions of dollars to Hamas in Gaza. He argued that it was better for Israel to serve as the pipeline to ensure the funds don't go to terrorism. Now that we are supervising, we know it's going to humanitarian causes, the source said, paraphrasing Netanyahu. The Prime Minister also said that whoever is against a Palestinian Palestinian state should be for transferring the funds to Gaza because maintaining a separation between the PA and the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza helps prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu also spoke about his Bar Ilan speech in which he expressed support for a demilitarized Palestinian state a decade ago. In addition, he told the Likud candidates in the faction meeting that he opposes any population transfers of Jews or Arabs and that he's against uprooting even one person. He said that he had voted for the 2005 Gaza disengagement at first because it was only about territory, but when the discussions moved to moving thousands of people, he resigned from the government. Party leaders across the political spectrum have criticized Netanyahu's policies towards Gaza in general and the payment specifically. But anyway, I mean, you can see that like it was more complicated than just like him funding Hamas to keep them up. Like there's a lot of other things. There's like a lot of considerations at the time for this. Oh God, I'm trying to remember what there was a site that posted a lot of like, I don't think we have the transcript directly from the speech, unless it was a separate speech given about it. But I remember the site was in Hebrew and you had to translate it. Yeah, whatever. But I mean, whatever. Even in this, you can see that it's a little more complicated than just him funding Hamas, carrying the briefcases himself.
Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy, to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank.
When did he say that?
That's Netanyahu in 2019 in a meeting with the Likud leaders.
Okay.
That's what he's referring to, yeah. But it's right to ask, what else did he say? There was a lot that he said in that. It wasn't just that one. To suck. I hate people. This is why I would debate with so many people who just want to give me quotes. You can't debate quotes. You can't even really debate full speeches because there's more than that. But at the very least, give me the full speech. And I'm not saying he has to read the full speech, but you should know what's contained in it. Because what comes before and after these statements, like, well, he doesn't just want Gaza to fall apart and then to descend into chaos and then, have to give it back to the PA after going in and cleaning it out himself, right? There's a whole methodology here. Now, you can agree or disagree, but it's not just as simple as these two sentences that people always quote from this Likud party meeting. But
who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas.
Can you expand on the further context makes the statements better? No, I'm not talking about the statements being better or worse. If that's all you're taking from this, is that you're missing everything that I'm talking about. I'm not saying it makes it better or worse. I'm just saying that there was more involved in this statement. I believe, from what I remember from reading it, the context was essentially that the Gaza Strip was going to fall apart. There was like the amount of aid going in wasn't enough. The Palestinian Authority, I don't believe, wanted to transfer money to the Gaza Strip. Qatar was the only one that seemed to want to fund the administration in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu didn't want the Gaza Strip to become poor, to fall into chaos, and then to collapse in a way that the Israeli military would have to go in, clean it all up, and then once it was cleaned up, hand it back to Mahmoud Abbas on a silver platter saying, okay, well, here you go. We did all the work, and now we've made this palatable for you to control again. So Netanyahu says, well, Qatar should be allowed to have money come in here. They'll fund it. We know that it's going to Hamas. We know that it's going to the Palestinian to the Gaza Health Ministry or whatever, like these people, but they're going to maintain stability in that region. And it helps because it also keeps the Palestinians divided amongst themselves. It means that Hamas and Islamic Jihad are going to be powerful administrators in Gaza that will be stable and not collapsing because they're broke. And the Palestinian Authority will exist in the West Bank with the PLO. So it also, if you are opposed, especially if he's trying to sell this to his party, right? If you are opposed to the existence of a Palestinian state, you should absolutely support the transfer of Qatari funds to the Gaza Strip. Because look, it keeps Hamas strong and it keeps them as administrators and it keeps them opposed to the Palestinian Authority, right? It's like a byproduct essentially of what's going on here, which I think is probably something that they want. But again, it's not just we should fund Hamas, we should fund the terrorists. It's not just that. It's more complicated. And also, by the way, this backfired because now he's had to do exactly what he said he didn't want to have to do. So
this is part of our strategy, to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank.
When did he say that?
That's Netanyahu in 2019 in a meeting with the Likud leaders.
Okay.
2019.
Okay.
In the meeting with who?
2019. Okay.
What leader?
Eli, let me park
Likud
this for a
leader.
second. Guys, let's park this. Michael, what should the Palestinians do?
What do the Palestinians do?
Yeah.
I didn't know where we are now. We're talking to the Palestinians, what they should do. I'm going to go back a little bit because I very mistakenly decided to wait for people to talk, that I would talk. Big mistake. But a couple things. You have to point out the boring things that everyone you hear like by rote.
But isn't that completely fucking insane? We should fund Hamas because the terror group is useful against the establishment of a Palestinian state. The problem is you're retrospectively analyzing it like the decision is so obvious, right? Because we could just as easily look at it a different way and say, and something else could have happened, potentially something worse could have happened, and say, well, wasn't that fucking insane? What if they say, no external money is going to flow into the Gaza Strip. We're just going to let Hamas basically starve out, and we're going to let them have no money. Then the whole world will be saying, oh, collective punishment. Oh, you're starving Palestinians. Oh, you're depriving them of food and humanitarian supplies. Oh, like, look at the horrible things you're causing these people to suffer through, right? No, it's a lose-lose. Like, yeah, you can look at it retrospectively now and go like, oh my God, it was so bad that they let that money go there. But what were they supposed to do? Let the region starve? Let the region have no money whatsoever? Like, what was the, like, yeah.
All the time is that, there are 2 million Arabs that live in Israel.
True.
There are 0 Jews that live in Gaza, right? It's a relevant data point. And I suspect what Briahnna is saying with right of return, and I think you said something that this place called Israel, or so-called Israel or something. I suspect, and this is the weird conversation that we're having when people talk about Zionism these days. Incredible to me that I'm like, I thought this was a settled matter. Zionism is about this creation of the state of Israel, which was created. Are you a Zionist or are you an anti-Zionist? What I'm trying to figure out is if my opponents here believe that the state of Israel should exist at all. And if we should...
That's a good question to get more closely, yeah. Because the answer from the other side, if they're honest, they're going to say, well, actually, I believe that the creation of an Israeli state necessitates ethnic cleansing. Therefore, no, I'm opposed to Zionism. I don't think that was ever right. And then they might bring up that quote of they believed it was a land without a people for a people without a land, which was false.
Wipe a UN member nation off the map, because that is effectively what right of return is. The right of return is not take 7 million refugees, and this number expands. These are people who have never been in the area, have resettled other places. And Benny Morris's book is far more nuanced than that is allowing, that there were people who were expelled, there were people that were forced out by their own side, etc. Benny Morris has actually said this, and you quoted him, so let me go to him, that if you do have right of return, which by the way, 7 million people doesn't mean 7 million people that go to the West Bank and Gaza.
Correct.
Very specifically doesn't mean that. It goes to what Israel is now.
And there are even better talking points. I don't know if he's aware of it, but there are people, like I think the majority of Palestinian refugees in Jordan, the majority of Palestinians in Jordan are considered refugees even though they have Palestinian citizenship. Jordanian citizenship. So there are people who have citizenship in the country of Jordan who are also still considered refugees. Also, the majority of people in Gaza, and I don't know the percentage of people in the West Bank, are considered refugees, even though they're in Palestine. They're considered Palestinian refugees in Palestine, but it's because they're not back in Israel in their original homes. No other refugee in the history of the planet has had that treatment. That's an amazing take on refugeedom.
In what Morris said, and I think it was an article Tablet, he said, the response to this is if you think October 7th is bad, this is going to be a giant bloodletting. This is not as if 7 million Danes are coming in. These are people who have an ideological predisposition. Obviously Hamas now in West Bank is the most popular party. As Eli points out, Mahmoud Abbas and the PA have been as corrupt as you can be. You can see that with Suha Arafat's lifestyle in Paris. They've been stealing money for years. So that's their fault in some ways too. But the popularity of Hamas, and again, we have to be very simple about this, and cite this and cite that, but in its charter, which is just saying, hey, guys, this is explicitly what we believe. Which was said, by the way, the other day. There was a quote from one of these Hamas spokesmen, and they said, no, we don't believe that we will never have a two-state solution with the Israelis. Israel must go. That is a non-negotiable position, and if anyone thinks, as the people who were chanting out in front of Columbia were chanting, and they weren't students, but important distinction apparently, but burn Tel Aviv to the ground. It's not these are not nice people.
So what should the Palestinians do?
What the Palestinians do is, I have to be really boring again and repeat what Eli said, is don't launch wars that will result.
But how do they?
They need a positive thing. What can they do? Don't just say they shouldn't launch a war. What should they do? What do Palestinians need to do to move towards peace?
Is don't launch wars that will result.
But
in
how
what
do
we're
they
seeing.
address the fact that they're living in conditions in which they don't want to be living?
It's the same answer. It's the same answer. I mean, look.
No,
But just not starting wars hasn't gotten them anywhere, right? The West Bank isn't any closer to having more territory under its control than it was in 1997. When was the Y memorandum? 1998. They're not any closer to having any more territory. Like what? So it seems like the not doing war isn't helping them. Should be the big pushback on this.
That's a negative. Don't start a war is a negative answer. How do they get a better deal for them without starting more
Well,
wars?
how about I say, don't start future wars? That's one thing that you could do. But if you think about this, there was a Palestinian guy I saw interviewed, and he said, before the Second Intifada, I could take my donkey from the West Bank to
Gaza, and Israeli citizens, I think, would also visit the Gaza Strip. They go to the beaches, they go to the markets. The integration was definitely greater. The Second Intifada fucked up so much shit for so many people.
See, and as a result of militancy in the absolute people shouting about intifadas, when you go back and see 1,000 Israelis were killed, 1,200 Israelis were killed during the Second Intifada. And what do you do now? I mean, look, it's a very, very difficult question. If I had that answer, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be in Tel Aviv cashing checks because I knew the answer to this. But the answer is, in the broadest possible way.
In the broadest possible way, the answer is Palestinians need a positive ethos, something to build their country towards and something to aspire to, instead of the negative ethos of just Israeli resistance and fighting to, reclaim lost honor. That's like the broadest point, but that's kind of macro and it's a little abstract. So in practice, there's a lot of policies that would need to be spoken about.
Is that you have a people that are corrupted by a corrupt ideology. What we will never talk about here, and I don't hear this talked about.
He's going to bring up Islam. It's not, whatever, I just don't think it's that big of a deal, but.
That are corrupted by a corrupt ideology. What we will never talk about here, and I don't hear this talked about in any of the conversations about the conflict now, is Islamism, is a radical Islamic view of the world, which is dangerous. And it's dangerous if it's not that it's anybody who has that sort of radical view of the world. And that is being inculcated in children, in the schools. I mean, we have these arguments with Ron DeSantis and the kids.
It is a problem, especially in the Gaza Strip. And you do need to fight against like the weird UNRWA schools, like the indoctrination stuff. Like these are bad things. Like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely not good. But I don't think these aren't like your 51% contributors to the conflict right now.
Books kids are reading here. Look at what is being taught to kids in Gaza. That is a very difficult question, Konstantin, and it's like a root and branch kind of thing. I don't see a solution.
I'm going to move on. We've got about 15 minutes
but thank
left.
you for letting me talk.
And what I want to focus on is the bit of this conversation that's never had, and it's not part of the motion, but I think it's very important that we talk about it, which is...
She's on her phone, damn. I wonder why. Is she looking stuff up or is she just like texting?
Right, what I want to focus on is the bit of this conversation that's never had, and it's not part of the motion, but I think it's very important that we talk about it, which is how
BJG.
does this, at some point, please God, get resolved in one way or another? And the maximalist positions from both sides are quite obviously unattainable, certainly in my opinion. How do we find a way out of this rather than having a debate about what happened in 1967 and 1945, because it doesn't appear to me that takes the conversation forward. So, Jake, perhaps you can start us.
I actually disagree with that framing a little bit.
Okay, tell me why.
I do believe peace is possible, but I think it actually requires a discussion of the past, because I think there does have to be a reckoning with the past in Israeli society in order for us to be able to move forward. And I want to talk about the United States as an analogy. So, in this country, we did terrible things to the Native Americans, it was horrific. What we did in time was, after World War II, we gave billions of dollars in reparations to the Native Americans. We realized we were able to accept that we had done bad things, and we also gave Native Americans citizenship. Okay, which they hadn't had for much of American history. That's the right way to deal with something like this.
These types of answers are instantly disqualifying. If there were 500 million Native Americans, we probably wouldn't have given them citizenship. Native Americans never represented like an existential demographic threat or an existential threat, period, to the United States. It's way, way, way different. If there were only 150,000 Palestinians, Israel would probably just give them citizenship and move on with it. That's not the issue, right? Can you explain your logic for why Islam is not the central cause of Palestinian behavior? You keep saying this, but you never provide an actual explanation. Which group around the world blows themselves up around civilians? I mean, the Japanese used kamikaze pilots to crash into United States ships during the battles over the Pacific. The reason why Islam is not the general defining thing that's uniting people against Israelis can be seen in the fact that despite all the calls for global jihad, despite Hamas begging over and over again for Muslims to rise up and help the Palestinians, it doesn't happen. There is no united Muslim world that is trying to engage in jihad against Israel. It's Hamas screaming over and over again, global jihad, it's Israel, and then people in the West saying, oh my God, global jihad, and the globe just happens to be Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas, which are, by the way, like even part of theoretically opposed sects of Islam, right? You've got, Islam is a part of the Shia sect of whatever. I think it's more specific than just Shia, and Hamas are considered themselves Sunnis. Yeah, if you look at the countries most heavily involved in fighting against Israel, it's not the most Muslim countries. It's not the heaviest Islamic countries. It's geographically the closest countries. It's Jordan, Egypt, and Syria, and Lebanon, I guess, or the southern part of it at least. When you look at the people that intercepted missiles when they came from Iran, it wasn't just Western countries. It was heavy Muslim countries. It was Saudi Arabia. It was Jordan. When you look at the coup in 2011 in Egypt and you saw the Muslim Brotherhood come into power, they didn't jihad against Israel. They honored the peace agreement. They honored the treaty that they had with them. One of the leaders literally wrote a letter to the current president of Israel saying as much. They would honor their agreement. So no, people can scream over and over again about Islam, 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 Islam. 20% of the Jewish or 20% of the Israeli population are Palestinians. The majority of them are Muslim. They didn't do a third intifada. They don't do a ton of fucking terrorist attacks. There's just, you can scream about it and you can argue about it and you can look at like sentences and words, but that analysis is boring. It doesn't explain, it's not explanatory for any part of the history of the region. It's not even explanatory for the current events that happen today. So to me, it's just largely fucking boring. But if that's what you want to hang your hat on, knock yourself out, I guess.
For much of American history. That's the right way to deal with something like this. And
give that some shape. What does that solution look like?
It looks like a right of return. So you have to have at least a little bit of that. I mean, if you draw the borders in the right way for a two-state solution, it's possible that that won't necessarily destroy the Jewish character, but
I'm sorry, hold on.
Solution look like?
It looks like a right of return. So you have to have at least a little bit of that. I mean, if you draw the borders in the right way.
A little bit of that, but a little bit of that has been offered time and time again. I don't think Palestinians are willing to accept a little bit of that. It was offered to Abbas in 2008. I think it was even part of, did they talk about a limited right of return in Camp David or Taba? I think they might have in Taba. I don't remember. They also talked about setting up a big fund to pay people too. You spoke about reparations, but that hasn't been enough in the past.
Way for a two-state solution. It's possible that that won't necessarily destroy the Jewish character, but
I mean, you can talk about the Muslims in Israel not doing terrorism, but I can point to the EU where every place Muslims are immigrating to, we see suicide bombings. Why are you bringing up Muslims in Europe when we're talking about Israel-Palestine? I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to that. Europe is not Israel. Europe is not Palestine. Neither Israel nor Palestine are in Europe. I don't know what you want me to say to that.
Why is that something? I don't understand why Michael is so interested in protecting that exactly. Again,
well, I think
destroy the Jewish. So you have to have at least a little bit of that. I mean, if you draw the borders in the right way for a two-state solution, it's possible that that won't necessarily destroy the Jewish character.
It's not possible for that because the Palestinians that want to go back to Israel don't want to go back to areas in a certain border. They want to go back to the cities that they lived in Israel proper, places, in Tel Aviv or Haifa, or I don't know the majority. I'm not even gonna pretend to know all the individual now Israeli cities that were inhabited by Palestinians. But they don't want to just go back to certain bordered areas.
Character, but why is that something? I don't understand why Michael is so interested in protecting that.
I don't know why you're interested in protecting the Jewish character of a state that has historically felt like it's been surrounded by an ethnic group that's wanted to destroy them. That's also founded and protecting of an ethnic group that's been persecuted all around the world? What do you mean you don't understand? Who is this guy? What's this guy's name? He's consistently just said the stupidest things over and over again. I don't know why he was even invited to talk about this, let alone why he feels comfortable talking about this. Why he just says the dumbest shit over and over again. Jason? Jake Klein. Who? Okay, that didn't help. Jesus. He works for The Intercept. Oh, that would explain it. Jacob Klein? He was a last-minute fill-in for Nathan Robinson. I don't know how much better Nathan would have been in this combo, but...
Exactly, like...
Well, actually, Nathan probably would have been better than this guy. Jesus.
I don't understand why Michael is so, like, interested in protecting that exactly. Like, again,
well, I think his argument is if you have 7 million Palestinians return, then you're in a position where that's going to cause way more conflict and war, not less. That's his argument, I think.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's about right.
I don't really think that's the case, and I think that's kind of ahistorical.
I feel like the next time, just also because I'm so over this, 'cause this is what I mean when I say like it just listening to these feels so stupid now. I feel like the next time I'm in a debate, I'm just gonna start pop quizzing people, which I never do because I think it looks bad. It makes me look like an asshole, and it's super rude and aggressive. But like my question here would be why? This would be a super simple question in response to that. Why do you think the majority of Jews that live in Israel today are Middle Eastern? Why do you think they're not all? Why do you think they're not all Ashkenazi Jews? Why do you think the majority of them look brown? Curious. It's because after 48, after 56, after 67, after 70, after every single major victory that Israel had in its wars, a lot of other Jews from a lot of other countries ended up fleeing to Israel. The idea that Muslim persecution or Arab persecution of Jewish people is ahistorical, what a wild statement. What are you talking about? In which history are we talking about? What planet are we talking about?
It's about right.
I don't really think that's the case, and I think that's kind of ahistorical for the conflict. I mean, listen, a lot has happened, so things are different now.
A lot has happened, so things are different now. That's not a very compelling argument to the people that would theoretically face oblivion if they fucked up, right? I grew up in Egypt. We get Israeli tourists all the time. We don't have an issue with them and see them as a neighbor. Even the Muslim general public only gets riled up when there's a war. Otherwise, we want peace. I don't know how true that is, but there's a dono from a guy.
But the conflict was really started by Zionists coming to Palestine, not to live just in a society with all these Arabs, but with the intention of forming a Jewish state on top of their country.
Then you should just say like, oh, well, then this was the question I was posing to Rabbani and Finkelstein, the two fake scholars. Why is it that Israel was willing to accept in 47 a state that would have been comprised of 55% Jews and 45% Arabs if they didn't want to live with any of them? Can you explain that?
And the Arabs didn't really like that very much.
So your solution is to not have a Jewish state?
Yes. Oh, yeah. She's like, hell yeah. You know she's anti-Semitic. She's probably powered by anti-Semitism. Yeah, she hates the Jews. You can tell. You absolutely can tell. She loves it. God, she must have had a horrible day when she woke up and those 4 hostages got retrieved. She was probably so happy to see so many Palestinians died, at least so she could focus on that. Ooh, you know she hates him. Ooh, you know she hates him.
Your solution is to not have a Jewish state? Briahnna, you're nodding, so we'll get to you.
Okay, listen, I think that is both ethical and workable. However, peace is what's most important to me. And
this is why I keep saying this, and I'll say this over and over and over and over and over again. Peace is such a worthless fucking word. Nobody wants peace. Nobody wants peace. People want justice. They want a resolution that they feel is just and right, okay? And you should be able to tell that when this guy's saying things like, yeah, if we just like eliminate the state of Israel and just make a new state, and then we just have peace. We have peace because the war is over. Peace for who? Peace on what terms? If you eliminate every single Jew in the Middle East, you'll have peace at least, or some kind of peace. There won't be any more wars between Jews and Arabs anymore, at least. Like,
I really want to
So
stress
how do we get there,
that.
right?
Yeah, and it's so I understand that, like, to get there, you'd have to convince the Israelis on the ground to want that. There has been hate that has developed amongst Palestinians over a century. Like, I certainly don't deny that. So there has to be changes in that society as well. It's a psychological shift, and that's why I say I do think we actually have to talk about the past and reckon with what happened with the past, so that people on both sides can be able to say wrong things happened here and we need to move on and change. And I actually do think that was sort of happening a little bit in Oslo.
Do you have a rough idea of how she's left? I don't know. Is it like 120 or something? I have no idea. I don't keep track of the number. Israelis should know. Those guys obsess over that stuff.
You know, you hear so much about how the tone shifted in that decade.
Which decade?
To move on and change. And I actually do think that was sort of happening a little bit in Oslo. You know, you hear so much about how the tone shifted in that decade. But it wasn't enough, and it wasn't going to go far enough. And, you know, ultimately, if there's some solution,
It wasn't enough. It wasn't going to go far enough. He just doesn't. It's whatever. I mean, it's like, this is like my understanding like 5 months ago, so I don't fault him. He just is. Okay.
listen, I don't know, this is literally the most complicated geopolitical conflict in the world. It's famous for that. And so any solution that can reach an agreement amongst these people and get them to stop fighting and get them to live in peace, I'm happy with that.
I hear you. That's why I'm asking the question. And by the way, I'm not expecting us to solve it here, although that'd be nice. But I do think we have an obligation to think about how this gets solved. So, Briahnna, what would your solution look like?
I think the idea that there can't be a world where Jews and Muslims, Arabs and non-Arabs live together is belied by the reality of history. Prior to the founding of Israel,
she's going to say prior to the founding of Israel, she's going to say Arabs and Jews lived together in peace and harmony in Palestine. They lived together so well, ignoring the fact that Jews were consistently relegated to dhimmi status in all of the caliphates, and ignoring the fact that Jews were not allowed equal representation under the Ottoman Empire or any of the prior caliphates. She's ignoring the massacres and the Arab to Jew violence that happened prior to 48. She's going to utter that retarded, clueless fucking talking point, because that's what she is. She's a walking list of tweets. That's all she has in the incredibly small brain that's smushed inside here.
Together is belied by the reality of history. Prior to the founding of Israel, Arab Jews did live peacefully alongside Muslims in what is now described as Israel. And there was this quip about how there are no Jews living in the in Gaza. Why would there be? You had an establishment of a Jewish state that is the #1 welfare beneficiary of the United States of America, receiving more American aid than any other country in the world, despite obviously being more affluent than most of the countries in the world. I think there's a relationship there. Currently, there is a minority, but a significant Christian population in Gaza. One of the oldest.
Why weren't there any Jews in Gaza? In 1948, when people talk about the Nakba, which was part of the large population transfer of Arabs or Palestinians out of what would become the borders of Israel in 48. People will only ever talk about expulsion in one way. However, all the Jews were expelled from the Gaza Strip in 48 when Egypt took over, and all the Jews were expelled from East Jerusalem and the West Bank when Jordan took over in 48 as well. That's why there weren't any Jews living in those places. There were Jews living in there after 67 in the Gaza Strip until Sharon pulled them all out in 2005. So
Christian churches in the world has been bombed by Israel in the course of all of this partnership there. Currently, there is a minority, but a significant Christian population in Gaza. One of the oldest Christian churches in the world has been bombed by Israel in the course of all of this. Former Congressmember Justin Amash has lost family members that have been killed by Israel in the context of this, and even that wasn't enough to shake American foreign policy.
How do we get to a solution?
Okay. So I think that we have to not talk about Arabs as though they're somehow constitutionally different than Danes. I don't know why we would essentialize populations in that way.
Oh, fuck me. God, fuck. I read a book recently called Conflict and Culture in the Middle East. This desire to... Let me just read a quote out of this. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Hold on. Chill. God, that statement is so fucking stupid. Meow. What? have to use the Kindle app to open it? Are you serious? What's up? How you doing? Why are you freaking out? I'm going to read you like 3 or 4 paragraphs, okay? It's not that long. Get fucked. The remarkable development of Islam, the 7th century CE, must be understood to a degree within the context of Arabian balanced opposition. So in this book, he talks a lot about a concept called balanced opposition, where part of the ways that society developed in the Middle East was that single people would fight single people, families would fight families, tribes would fight tribes. That balanced opposition works to make it so that there's like these an equilibrium of power that is basically existing through these regions because of like nested sets of groups of people, essentially. Without getting into that, but. To a degree within the context of Arabian balanced opposition, Islam provided in the Ummah, the community of Muslims, a more inclusive level of integration than tribal organization. But at the same time, it also provided an opponent to the Ummah, the world of infidels, which had to be confronted for the glory of God and for the profit of plunder, deemed as already belonging to Muslims. Islam, whatever its many dimensions and complexities were, incorporated the balanced opposition structure of the tribal society which it overlay. Perhaps it could hardly have done otherwise and been accepted as it was. The thesis of this book is that balanced opposition is a dominant theme in Arab culture and a central structure in Arab society. Furthermore, as I shall argue shortly, balanced opposition shapes other aspects of social life and, like all structures, limits the possibilities. In this thesis, is this thesis open to the criticism widespread in postmodern and postcolonial theory that characterizing societies as a form of essentializing distortion, assuming uniformity and denying the humanity of the members of that society? The postcolonial argument set forth in Edward Said's groundbreaking Orientalism that people are really more or less the same and that any distinction between cultures imposes a false essentialism aimed at defining certain populations as other, primarily to demean them and justify imperial and colonial oppression, rashly dismissed culture as of nugatory significance. The assumption that all people are just like us is a kind of ethnocentrism that projects our values, our ways of thinking, and our goals onto other people's. The anthropological study of culture around the world is based on a recognition of cultural differences, on an appreciation of the importance of culture in people's lives, and on respect for other people's cultures. The postcolonial argument that knowledge of other cultures is impossible because people and cultures do not exhibit uniformity jumps from a known fact to a false inference. All knowledge is based on abstraction, and abstraction draws commonalities and averages that exist beyond the acknowledged variation of the particulars. For example, there are different species and varieties of camel, but we would not therefore conclude that we cannot validly distinguish camels from horses. Tents, too, are different from one another in materials used and in structure, and yet tents are not houses, and the differences are fairly obvious. As regards cultures, there are variations both between and within Arab and Middle Eastern cultures, but anyone who argues on that basis that it is impossible to distinguish Arab culture from Hindu culture would not be being frank. He talks too that there are pros and cons to different types of arrangements depending upon what a particular culture allows. I'll just read this for a quick second. One important consequence of reliance on balanced opposition is an emphasis on individual independence, freedom, and responsibility, and also on equality and democracy. At the same time, the military virtues of prowess and courage and the goal of domination are highly valued. The reasons for this are clear. A decentralized system of defense based upon self-help, such as balanced opposition, relies on each individual to make judgments and act on his own or freely in collaboration with his fellow group members. Acting in defense and retaliation means engaging in violence, for which skill and courage are desirable. In tribal societies based on balanced opposition, male children are raised to be independent, to take responsibility for themselves, and to be ready and able to engage in sanctioned violence against designated enemies. Collective decisions about action are made democratically in councils in which all group members are free to speak. No mechanisms of coercion are available to force group members to act. Collective agreement on decisions puts moral pressure on each individual to fulfill his duty, and his reputation and honor are at stake. But ultimately, it is up to each individual to decide and act. The honorable man has no ruler and bows to no man, but stands on his own feet and his own reputation as an equal to others. So he goes on, it's like there's pros and cons to different things. Like just because you're talking about another society or another culture doesn't mean you have to say that that culture is wholly bad or that you're demeaning them or otherizing them. And sometimes, depending on where you go in the world, it can be important to recognize that there are different cultural aspects to different people that cause them to act or to accept or reject things in different ways. I'm sorry, I'm only bringing this up because like this statement of like, well, why would you not like this culture or these two groups of people clashing? Everybody can be just like us in America is not true. There are different cultures that exist in different parts of the world for different reasons, and they've got different proclivities. The statement that she's saying is just so fucking stupid. It's so clueless. If you've ever been to any other place in the world and you step outside of like a tourist trap or you step outside of like the most friendly English speaking area you can, you'll see that like different people act differently in different parts of the world. Some in better ways, some in worse ways, some in different ways. Her statement is just so stupid.
Get to a solution.
So I think that we have to not talk about Arabs as though they're somehow constitutionally different than Danes. I don't know why we would essentialize populations in that way.
Like, that's such a stupid fucking statement. You don't think that there are any cultural commonalities inherited from a group of people that were ruled by some of the most expansive empires in history? You don't think that there are any cultural commonalities between people that were a part of a unified nation, that descended from similar families, that descended under similar rule structures, that all have similar religious beliefs? You don't think there's any commonalities that we can speak of? You don't think there's any difference between the average American and the average Swede, or the average Swede and the average Moroccan, or the average Moroccan and the average Australian? Like, of course we can speak about broad differences in groups of people. And some, like, it's just such a stupid, this statement is so stupid. Sorry.
We have to be open to the idea
Danes don't
that
do
the people...
October 7th?
Wait a minute. Muslims
What did she say?
would essentialize populations in that way. We have to be open to the idea
Danes don't
that
do
the people...
October 7th?
I'm not understanding what he's saying. I'm sorry. What is he saying?
They're somehow constitutionally different than Danes. I don't know why we would essentialize populations in that way. We have to be open to the idea
Danes don't
that
do
the people...
October 7th?
Oh, because Danes don't do October 7th. Oh, that's kind of a dumb statement, but whatever.
Wait a minute. Muslims didn't do October 7th.
No.
That statement is also okay.
Since the Vikings, to be
Gazans
fair.
didn't do October 7th, and if you're adopting the worldview that everyone in Gaza, the 2.3 million people, are responsible, then you are very much in line
That's
with
not what I said.
Netanyahu's right-wing government,
That's
who
not what I
thinks
said.
that and therefore thinks it's appropriate to violate international law by doing collective punishment on the population, literally starving them to death,
Fine.
having them on the brink
No,
of famine, killing 13,000 kids. There was a very passionate description.
Having them on the brink of famine and starving. By the way, I don't know if I'll go over it, but there's another thing. I think the UN, I believe, I've only headlined in one paragraph to this, so I say this cautiously. I might read this later. I might probably read it off stream. I think the UN has completely walked back the IPC classifications on the starvation stuff. I think they tossed all of it. Saying that there wasn't good data to support any of those conclusions. IPC, was it this? Posted June 8th. Famine Review Committee reviewed the famine early warning systems network, IPC compatible analysis for the northern governance of the Gaza Strip, conclusions and recommendations. We won't read this whole thing, we're just... the main conclusions of the FRC are summarized at Table 1. The FRC would like to use this opportunity to communicate two extremely important points. Firstly, all stakeholders who use the IPC for high-level decision-making must understand that whether a famine classification is confirmed does not in any manner change the fact that extreme human suffering is without a doubt currently ongoing in the Gaza Strip, and does not in any manner change the immediate humanitarian imperative to address the civilian suffering by enabling complete, safe, unhindered, and sustained humanitarian access into and throughout the Gaza Strip, including through ceasing hostilities. All actors should not wait until a famine classification for the current period is made to act accordingly. Secondly, the FRC would like to highlight that the very fact that we are unable to endorse or not FEWSNET's analysis is driven by the lack of essential up-to-date data on human well-being in northern Gaza and Gaza at large. Thus, the FRC strongly requests all parties to enable humanitarian access in general, and specifically to provide a window of opportunity to conduct field surveys in northern Gaza to have more solid evidence of the food consumption, nutrition, and mortality situation. My understanding is they basically said that, well, actually, I don't think we have... Fuck, I should just read this instead of just giving the summaries from... Unit of Analysis, Northern Governance, T1. Okay, key conclusions. The FRC does not find the FEWS-NET analysis plausible given the uncertainty and lack of convergence of the supporting evidence employed in the analysis. Therefore, the FRC is unable to make a determination as to whether or not famine thresholds have been passed during April. As the FRC does not find the FEWS-NET analysis plausible for the current period, the FRC is unable to endorse the IPC Phase 5 classification for the projection period. However, this FuseNet projection is in line with the FRC projection done in March 2024, which has not yet been updated. So when you heard people saying that there are more starving Gazans today than there are starving people in the entire rest of the world, that's the statements that they're referring to, where they're saying, actually, we can't really validate any of that. We don't really have the data for any of that analysis. That was the IPC Phase 5 classification that was projected here. This is pretty short. The FEWSNet food availability analysis excludes the contribution of commercial and or privately contracted deliveries, potentially between 1,820 metric tons of food on the low side and 3,850 metric tons of food on the high side in the month of March, and about 2,400 to 4,000 metric tons of food in the month of April. While the intervals are extremely wide, indicative of a high level of uncertainty, this corresponds to the potential exclusion of about 25 to 76% coverage of the daily kilocalorie requirements in March and 34 to 82% in April. So from their analysis, they were excluding food that could have, on the high end, accounted for 76% or 82% of the required caloric intake. Even a conservative approach towards the commercial and or privately contracted food deliveries to northern Gaza, which the FRC considers possible, would still indicate a contribution of 25 to 34% coverage of the daily kilocalorie requirement in March and April, respectively. That's on the lower bounds. This is crazy, guys. The food availability analysis excludes the contribution of WFP deliveries to bakeries in northern Gaza. What is WFP? World Food Program, I think. Deliveries to bakeries in northern Gaza, including a reported 940 was that megatons or metric tons? I'm sorry, not megatons. Metric tons of flour, sugar, salt, and yeast in April. While the intervals are extremely wide, indicative of a high level of uncertainty, this corresponds to the potential exclusion of about 4 to 15% coverage of the daily kilocalorie requirement. The FuseNet food availability analysis attributed a value of 3,640 calories per kilogram of unspecified WFP food assistance delivered by trucks and 2,657 calories for unspecified food assistance delivered by airdrops as well for maritime deliveries. The FRC estimates those values could be significantly higher or significantly lower. Similarly, FuseNet estimated the composition of non-U.S. airdrops is including 7% food, which could be significantly higher or lower. The FRC finds the last assumption above to be conservative, though plausible. However, the exclusion of all commercial and or privately contracted deliveries and WFP deliveries of flour, sugar, yeast, and salt to bakeries translates to the exclusion of food equal to as much as 38 to 49% coverage of the daily caloric requirements in April. While FuseNet estimated the caloric availability in the area as covering only 59 to 63% of the needs based uniquely on humanitarian food assistance in April. The review done by the FRC estimates that this range would be 75 to 109% if commercial and or privately contracted food deliveries were included, 157% if a higher estimate was used. It is possible and likely that a vast part of these commercial and or privately contracted deliveries was and remains difficult to access, especially for the most vulnerable. However, the FRC finds unlikely that the totality of these supplies was and remains completely inaccessible to the population. The FRC notes that FuseNet does not present up-to-date data or evidence for April from standardized indicators for food consumption and livelihood change derived from survey methods, such as the Food Consumption Score, Household Hunger Scale, or other indicators found in the IPC reference table. While IPC protocols do allow for the utilization of data that is not necessarily up to date, it must be interpreted for its relevance to current status analysis by considering the highly dynamic situation. The FuseNet analysis utilizes survey data on food consumption collected 2 months before April, together with more recent, though incomplete, contributing factor analysis of availability and access to food. The pre-April period reflects conditions when food availability was at one of its lowest points, with only 9 to 15% of daily kilocalorie needs met. This is the period where observed extremely high levels of food insecurity far surpassed the IPC famine threshold for food consumption. While an updated outcome analysis employing households economy approach is provided by FuseNet, the modeling incorporates data inputs from months prior to April that may not fully reflect the conditions in April given the highly dynamic situation. So it sounds like what they were doing, I'm inferencing and extrapolating from what I've read. It sounds like they were doing is they were saying basically they were taking the time period right after the war started when basically everything was cut, and they were basically saying like, okay, well, we're going to pretend that this is all the food going in. We're going to project this forward and use that essentially, which seems a little bit wacky. Read the second paragraph on page 5. On this page 5, on the PDF page 5, or the document page 5? What's a real bummer is that you'd think people would be happy to hear that Palestinians are not starving en masse, but I have a feeling it's considered bad news for Palestinian advocates. Oh, sure. While the analysis conducted during the review estimates that the percentage of the calorie requirements met are higher than that of the FoodNet, the lower FoodNet estimates do suggest two key points. One, that there was a significant increase in food availability from February to March to April, and two, that nearly 100% of daily calorie requirements were available for the estimated population of 300,000 people in April, even using conservative calculations. Wait, who are these 300,000 people? Are those the 300,000 that were said to be living in IPC 5 category, in the IPC 5 category? Wait, that can't possibly be the case. I can't be reading that correctly. Because if that's correct, that means that even using conservative estimates, that report was a complete and total bold-faced fucking lie. How many people were said to be living in IPC 5? The current one they had was 677,000 listed here. This is for the estimated population. They say 300,000 here. I wonder what the 300,000 here is talking about. But this is saying that while the analysis conducted during the review estimates that the percentages of caloric requirements met are higher than that of the FoodNet, the lower FoodNet estimates suggest two key points. The lower estimate, one, that there was a significant increase in food availability from February to March to April, and two, that nearly 100% of daily caloric requirements were available for the estimated population of 300,000 people in April, even using conservative calculations. So this was saying that 677,000 people were living in Phase 5, IPC Phase 5, which counts as what is the definition of IPC? IPC Phase 5 is defined as households have an extreme lack of food and or other basic needs even after full employment of coping strategies. Starvation, death, destitution, and extremely critical acute malnutrition levels are evident. For famine classification, area needs to have extreme critical levels of acute malnutrition and mortality. Famine is a classification of IPC Phase 5 at area level. In a given area, famine occurs when food security, nutrition, and mortality altogether portray famine conditions, meaning at least 20% of the population is affected, with about 1 out of 3 children being acutely malnourished and 2 people dying per day for every 10,000 inhabitants due to outright starvation or to the interaction of malnutrition and disease. So 10,000 inhabitants, we'll just go with half the population of Gaza. So 1 million people divided by 10,000 divided by 2. So that means that 50 people per day should be dying of starvation. So for 1 month, we would have expected to see 1,500 people dying of starvation. The highest number I ever saw was 27, and I don't believe anybody's reporting that number anymore. The 300,000 is a population of northern Gaza, not the whole strip, which is what the report focuses on. Okay. But I think the northern part is supposed to theoretically be the worst part anyway, right? So, wait, times 2, not divided by 2. Wait, did I fuck that up? 2 people dying for every 10,000 inhabitants. So for every 10,000 inhabitants, times 2. Oh, I'm sorry. So it should have been 6,000 people dying of starvation per month. I wonder if they say anything about deaths. The FRC considers that the scenario and assumptions developed for the evolution of the crude death rate and under 5 death rate are not supported by the available evidence for the current period of analysis. It appears instead plausible that the steep increase in deaths due to malnutrition and or dehydration that was reported by the Ministry of Health in March did not continue at the same rate into April. What was the deaths due to malnutrition or dehydration that was reported by the Ministry of Health in March? What were these deaths? Do they cite these? I couldn't find any. Amount of starvation deaths, Gaza. I thought I saw 27 was confirmed by some organization. This says 37. Only 37 people died of, who are we sourcing? A and B. According to CNN, the true number of dead people from starvation may already be higher, as limited access to northern Gaza has hindered the ability of aid agencies to fully assess the situation there. 2 and 1. Child dies of malnutrition and dehydration report. We have an Al Jazeera source, June 1st, reported by Wafa News Agency. A 13-year-old Palestinian child has died due to malnutrition and dehydration in Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, Wafa News Agency has reported. Where's the 37 number? Child dies of malnutrition and dehydration. A and B. The second source here is newborns die of hunger and mothers struggle to feed their children as Israel siege condemns Gaza to starvation. Again, I don't like to... it sounds so heartless and cruel and evil, and I don't mean to sound that way, but like, this woman is not emaciated. How did her child die of starvation? I don't understand what's happening. Am I misunderstanding? I say I'm misunderstanding something to try to be humble, but like this doesn't make sense. Or maybe it's an old picture. Like this woman, at least from her face, she doesn't look emaciated. Had a 7-year-old daughter, had a 7-year-old child die of starvation. My daughter moved to God's mercy because of the lack of calcium, potassium, and oxygen, she told CNN on Monday. Suddenly, everything dropped because she was not eating anything with iron or eggs. She used to eat eggs every day before the war. Now nothing. She passed away. This doesn't sound like a starvation death. What is it? What are we talking about? This doesn't sound like... At least 15 children in northern Gaza have died from dehydration and malnutrition, a Palestinian Ministry of Health spokesperson said Sunday. Also, I'm so sorry, but like, what is this? The medical worker told CNN that patients in the intensive care and neonatal units were dying from malnutrition and a lack of oxygen. The UN figure is 32 as of 6 days ago. Oh, okay. I thought they stopped reporting it at all, but now they're still reporting 32. Wait, this is from June. We're in June. The UN Health Agency reported 32 deaths from malnutrition. It's like tragic. It is just tragic. Like the reporting on here and like the what like even knowing what the is happening is hard to understand. It is possible that deaths were occurring where households were sheltering rather than in health facilities, precluding the recording and reporting of these deaths. Repeated attacks on and around health facilities during or shortly before the current analysis period may well have increased people's reluctance to attend health facilities and impacted the functionality of these facilities. This would have, in turn, increased the likelihood that deaths would have remained underreported or unreported. However, there remains considerable uncertainty about the death toll in northern Gaza during this period, particularly for non-trauma mortality, an uncertainty that will only be overcome when adequate humanitarian access is allowed to permit the implementation of a comprehensive survey. Have they dropped all the IPC5 projections then for the Gaza Strip then? Has it been completely dropped or... This is wild. Okay, sorry. Anyway, that's where they're at for that, but...
It's appropriate to violate international law by doing collective punishment on the population, literally starving them to death, having them on the brink of famine, killing 13,000 kids. There was a very passionate description of the graphic reality of
Oh, he's asking the question. How many starvation deaths are there?
October 7th at the beginning of this talk. And I just want to take a moment to say that it's also
And now she's going to preach to the choir again.
true that we've seen video after video of Palestinian father picking up
the shaking the baby in front of the camera after the Rafah camp explosion.
pieces of his children and collecting them in a plastic bag.
Oh, never mind. This is a different video she's talking about.
I totally agree. The question is why in Israel,
Brianna, let me give you...
Israelis are rioting.
20 more seconds.
Are rioting.
She has to preach more because she's clueless.
20 more seconds if you want to talk about getting to a solution.
In Israel, protesters...
These people don't want solutions. They just want more dead civilians, especially people of color, so that they can grift and make more money talking about it.
are protesting Netanyahu because of the news widely reported again this week that he rejected a deal to release all of the hostages on October 8th. There are people who...
Yes, that is true. That there was a rejection where Hamas came in, did the largest terrorist attack in the history of Israel, and then the day after said, listen, can you let us do that attack for free since we took 250 hostages and we'll just send them back and we'll call it even Stevens? That is correct. Why the f*** would anybody expect you to accept that deal? What an unhinged, inhuman thing to say.
Rejected a deal to release all of the hostages on October 8th. There are people who have been living with no medical treatment, the American soldier that just had the proof of life without an arm, because Netanyahu has made the decision to want to persecute this war and get, okay, the answer is...
You're not answering my question.
I'll answer the question.
Go.
I'm sorry, I do feel like a lot of responses...
20 more seconds.
Okay.
20 more seconds. The solution, please, go.
The solution is there has to be, I think there was a world where they had a two-state solution. America just said again, it's not demonstrated again that's not a part of our policy, as evidenced by the fact that we vetoed the recognition of Palestine as a state, which is a path toward getting a two-state solution just last week. So there has to be a one-state solution, which means that there cannot,
She advocates for the destruction of Israel. That's fine. Because remember, when these people say one-state solution, they mean one-state solution with an unlimited right of return. Right now, there are about 7 million Jewish people, I believe. It's about 7 million Jewish people live in Israel. There's about 2 million Palestinians that live in Israel. There's about 3 million that live in the West Bank. And there's about 2 million that live in the Gaza Strip. I think there's about 7 million Jewish people. There's about 7 million Palestinians. And there's about 6 million Palestinian refugees. So if you brought them all back, it would be about 7 million Jews. It'd be about 13 million Palestinians. That's the one state that these people are always advocating for when they say one state solution. That is what they are. Don't ever forget that. That is always what they are advocating for.
Hamas is talking about eliminating Israel. It's talking about not killing all of the Jews. It's about eliminating the idea.
Okay.
It's about...
Leave it there. We'll leave it there.
And this is laughable because what Jew wants to live as a minority in an Arab-controlled state historically? As even though this guy over here said that's ahistorical, historically that has never turned out well for Jewish people.
We'll leave it there.
Let me just finish, sir. Can I just finish the sentence? It's about eliminating the idea of a Jewish state, ending a Jewish state.
Yes, but the 50 or so, or however many fucking Arab states or whatever, like that's fine. But one Jewish state, that's way too much. One Jewish state is way. How many? Wait, hold on. I should actually know this. How many Arab majority states exist? Okay, sorry, 22, not 50. The Arab world is made of at least 19 states where Arabs are the majority of the population. The Arab League, an international organization, includes these 19 states, plus the Comoros, Djibouti, and Somalia for a total of 22 member states. So there are 22 states in the Arab League, 19 states where Arabs are the majority of the population. But one Jewish state is too much.
An ethno-national state and having a state more like what we have in the United States of America.
If I can just respond to that one thing.
Sir, can I just finish the sentence? It's about eliminating the idea of a Jewish state. Ending a Jewish state, ending an ethno-national state, and having a state more like what we have in the United States of America.
Whatever she's describing, whatever one-state solution she's talking about, it would look nothing like the United States of America. Again, this is just a privileged, like Western white, truly, take on global politics. It is just the most clueless, detached, lack of understanding, like white-centric, Western-centric view that you could ever have on how countries exist in the rest of the world. It's an unbelievably clueless take, but...
I can just respond to that one thing quickly.
Michael, we're actually running out of time.
Yeah, very, very quick. The Danes' point, I mean, the pluralism of the Danes. It's not Gaza. I saw a news story the other day, the AFP, that about the 5 Jews left in Baghdad. You see the most vibrant Jewish population in the Middle East, and that was the other Nakba, 700,000 Jews that were run out of. I visited a totally destroyed shell of a synagogue in Libya. And my guide said to me, that used to be something back in the 1930s. We had a thriving. That is the problem in the neighborhood, is that, it's Russia, it's everywhere. Jews have been pushed out, and that is not as if it is just the problem that is localized to Gaza. It's the region.
So, a couple of minutes on what the solution is. How does this get solved? I know you said earlier that it's tough and you'd be making lots more money than you are.
You think that I'm going to come up with it in that short period of time?
Well, I would like to hear from all...
Who is in charge of Palestine/Hamas? Why does it feel like there are no names when it comes to leadership? I don't know, because they just have no agency. Nobody really gives them any agency. When you're talking about the Gaza Strip, I believe there's generally three names that are associated with major leadership. There is Ismail Haniyeh. I can't pronounce this guy's fucking name. This guy is considered the, I believe this guy would be considered the, do they call it the Politburo? But this is like the big guy for Hamas. This is like their big head leader dude who spends most of his time, I believe, living in Qatar. I'm pretty sure. You have, what is Sinwar's first name? So this is one guy, okay? Haniyeh. You've got Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar, who's considered to be like the leader of the Gaza Strip. This is the leader of the Gaza Strip, who's a member of Hamas. And then you've got, as part of Hamas, the military arm is called Al-Qassam Brigades. No, yes. Azadin Al-Qassam Brigades. People just call them Al-Qassam Brigades or Al-Qassam, whatever. And this is headed by Mohammed Daif, I think. I don't know what this guy looks like, but I think these would be like the three biggest players, I believe, when it comes to talking about the Gaza Strip. I don't know what the name. Who's the head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Fuck me. I don't know who the name of the head is of. Ziad al-Nakhala. I don't ever hear this guy brought up. And then their arm is called Al-Quds Brigades. I don't know who their spokesman is. Abu Hamza. I don't know. But I think those are the three Hamas leaders that, if you want to be familiar with any leadership, those are the three that I see referenced sometimes. But internationally, we just don't talk about them because Hamas and them have no agency, I guess. I don't know why, but.
All of you.
I'm going to come up with it in that short period of time.
Well, I would like to hear from all of you a step towards the solution. I think that's a reasonable ask.
A step towards the solution is the destruction of Hamas and the return of the hostages.
How do you do that?
That's a start.
Okay.
How do you destroy Hamas?
It's happening now. It's happening now.
It's not.
I mean, we had a conversation. If we believe Hamas's own numbers that 6,000 of their fighters have been killed,
So
that's a start.
You're
Okay,
comfortable.
Brian, sorry, you've had your time. Go for it.
Well, I just want to say something. In a rare point of agreement with Briahnna, that I agree that we should think about a world where Arabs and Muslims and Jews can live together in a peaceful civil society. But fortunately,
One of the biggest kill shots, in my opinion, to that would be if you want to see a world where everybody can live together peacefully. You arguably can look at a microcosm of the Al-Aqsa compound or the Temple Mount. When Muslims control the Temple Mount, Jews aren't even able to pray at the Western Wall, I don't believe. When Jews are in control of the Temple Mount, Muslims are allowed to go into Al-Aqsa Mosque. Jews are allowed to pray at the Western Wall. I think Christians are allowed to visit. More or less, everybody kind of can. So if you want to talk about like everybody being able to live together and play peacefully, it seems like it happens a little bit nicer under Jewish control than it does under Muslim control. Not to say that it's perfect right now. Obviously, people have issues with the idea of going into into Al-Aqsa and, cracking skulls or whatever like this. But just saying that in general, under Jewish control, it seems to play a little bit better. Destiny, Israel doesn't control Al-Aqsa, Jordan does. I mean, kind of. So for holy sites in Israel and in the West Bank, I think it's called the Waqf. There are these like trustees that kind of administrate these areas. And for the Temple Mount, for Al-Aqsa compound, I think that the Waqf, whatever the fuck it's called, is Jordan right now. But I mean, like, that's only happening because the territory is under Israeli control, right? It's not like Jordan has conquered that area or something. It's because Israel has allowed Jordan to have administrative control over it while they more or less rule the territory. But what? What's up?
fortunately, that place exists. It's called Israel.
Yeah, okay. He should. I feel like using the example of the compound is better to look at that, analyze that as a microcosm, or to ask the question: how many Jews live in any Arab majority countries? I think there's like one. I think it's like Morocco. I think has Jews, or is it Tunisia? No, I think it's Morocco. I think this is the biggest Jewish community in the world, in any Arab state outside of Israel. Well, Israel's not an Arab state. There's like 2,500 that live there. Iran has Jews? Wait, how many live in Iran? Iran Jewish population. Oh, Iran has 10,000 Jews. Where the fuck do these live in? Oh, they live in Tehran. Oh, never mind. Well, there you go. Iran has it too. Tunisia, Jewish population. 1,500. Iran technically isn't an Arab state, just a Muslim state though, but the Iran numbers are pretty controversial.
We should think about a world where Arabs and Muslims and Jews can live together in a peaceful civil society, but fortunately that place exists. It's called Israel. Now, my solution is very similar to Michael's. There are times in history when a particular group suffers such a massive military defeat that it creates ripples of discrediting of this kind of approach. And there needs to be a kind of reckoning for Palestinians to give up on their 100-year delusion that their freedom and that their sovereignty depends on the elimination of Israel. And I know that you are coming, Briahnna, from a very good place where you say, well, everybody should live in peace in one state from the river to the sea. But in fact, what you're doing is you're feeding the delusion that's only going to get more Palestinians killed.
I don't think this guy's made the best arguments or even the best history of analysis, but I 100% agree with this conclusion here. Obviously, it's not the international pressure from both ends on Israel is largely negative, I think, and is feeding delusions on both sides sometimes. It's not good.
What friends of Palestinians should say is very simply, this is never going to happen. You're not going to eliminate Israel, except half a loaf. And Israel changes on a dime. They have elections, it seems, every 3 months. So the point is, and by the way, the last government before this one had for the first time an Arab party in the ruling coalition. There are Arab Supreme Court justices. So if there was a viable Palestinian leader that said, all right, let's do it, let's negotiate a deal, I am sure the Israelis would say, great, because they just want to get on with their lives like, you know, so many other people in the world.
He's in prison.
How likely
Oh, I really wanted to hear a response to that. Oh, I really actually wanted to hear a response to that.
is that viable Palestinian leader to emerge in the
Well, it can
circumstances
only
that we're in
emerge
now?
after everybody who believes that Hamas has, you know, all of this momentum, sadly, you know, bolstered by these moronic college students and professors.
Hamas is literally bolstered by Benjamin Netanyahu.
That's such a stupid point, and not really, no. That's such a stupid, clueless. Hi, what's up? What do you want? Wait, why? What? What do you want? Okay, well, I don't speak retard.
What? Say it again?
You're blaming college students for bolstering Hamas when we know that Bibi Netanyahu, as quoted to you directly
why
just
didn't
now,
you ever
is the
mention
one
Qatar,
that's
by the way, in your
bolstering
list?
him.
When do you think Hamas came from? Do you think Hamas didn't exist until Netanyahu came into power? Like, what?
You
Eli,
factually
and why don't they have their own
misrepresented
nation?
Netanyahu.
Anyway,
Solution.
College kids have more power than the man literally funding Hamas.
For the physical
Literally? Why would we use literally if we weren't literally meaning literally? The literally? Like Netanyahu was personally paying for it, or?
destruction, the utter discrediting, the total rethink, so that every single Palestinian who thought that maybe Hamas had the way to their dream palace of a Palestine from the river to the sea, and that they were like, we were being lied to, they've brought us nothing but misery. And then at that point, maybe there's a moment to say, all right, let's negotiate. You can't always get what you want.
All right, can we get the slide with the QR code back up for people to be able to vote on the motion? And while that's happening, can I just say, I know it's been heated, but actually I wanted to acknowledge everyone up here for having what is, by
She's not happy with this right now.
the measure of this conversation, quite a civilized debate. No ad hominem, so please give it up for everybody. I know it's been unpleasant at times, but I really appreciate the fact that everybody gave it their best shot, and we did even talk about some of the ways that it might be solved. So I can't see. Israel's war on Hamas is a just war. Agree. 120%. This is some kind of Russian election stuff. Number of people.
It's just by number, yeah. It's not percentage.
Okay, right. It's just me being an idiot then. So just over 100 agree, just about 20 disagree, and about 25 are unsure. We didn't see what it was at the beginning, so I don't know if we shifted much of the conversation.
Is that the beginning?
It shift. Say that again, but louder. Okay, so from 71 to 74. Okay, percent. Okay, so we are slightly more convinced that it's a just war by an extra 3 percentage points. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me once again in thanking everybody on the panel. Michael Monahan, Eli Lake,
Thank you.
Jay Klein, and Briahnna Joy Gray. Thank you very much for being here, and we will see you tomorrow.
Supposedly, she called them all Islamophobic and said that, she wanted to. She hoped a bomb would be dropped in the building. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was what was reportedly said by her after. Damn. Debate response. Last month, Briahnna Joy and I debated Eli Lake and McMoynihan on Israel-Palestine at Dis Dialogues moderated by Konstantin Kisin. I don't know how to pronounce his name. We weren't given an opportunity on stage to respond to most of our opponents' arguments. Here's a video rebutting every single claim they made, going far beyond what would have been possible during a 1-hour event. This video isn't just for people like drama. It's designed to teach you about the conflict by going deep into the facts behind the talking points. And I mean deep. It's over 5 hours long with 149 citations. How do you have all this information in your brain, but you didn't have basic facts? This is why I don't trust people that do YouTube videos. I don't trust people that do prepared content.
Palestinian.
If you can't have the conversation, I don't think you know it. I just don't think you have the information. Black sheep. Is that him?
Conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews, because of
The GMH. Do we want to look at the sections? I'm not going over all this, but
Down.
Okay. Did you understand what he was getting at there with the Qatar sovereign states thing?
I understood that he kind of dodged the question.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that wasn't just me because I couldn't figure out what the logic was or how.
What do you like to
Very content. And I'm not saying that I like that.
in the sense that if you come into my home and kill my wife, and then I go into your home and kill you, your wife, your whole family, isn't there a point at which that ceases to be just?
Well,
no matter
it
what the
depends if your
provocation?
wife is killed by an organization that is supported by sovereign states like Qatar and have enormous amounts of funding and have essentially an army. That is what the Israelis are trying to destroy. They're not trying to destroy the two people that came in and killed this particular family.
But they are killing a lot of civilians.
Of course, it is a war, and I'm not saying that I like that. I absolutely do not. And it sounds like you're just engaging in cliche when you say every death in a war is a tragedy. It is true, and you do have to say it. It's not a bit of throat clearing. But when you look at these numbers, which are very, very contested. I mean, Brianna's contesting some of the other numbers, but you can also contest the number of people who have died, the number of civilians who died.
What number do you think is the number of Gazans who died?
I would have no idea.
I promise you I'll get to that. Let's just finish this. I want you like
I will say
to
it's not I'm not on the ground there. Even Hamas has revised their numbers down.
Okay, did you understand what he was getting at there with the Qatar sovereign states thing?
I understood that he kind of dodged the question.
how do you not understand what he's saying? There's a severe cognitive issue here, disability or something. He was saying that you're not just fighting an individual, you're fighting an entity that has the support of foreign sovereign states. You're not just fighting one individual terrorist. You're not fighting an ordinary non-state actor. You're fighting what's arguably a state actor, or at least administrator, that has support and funding from other whole countries. How do you not understand what he's saying here?
Okay, I wanted to make sure that wasn't just me because I couldn't figure out what the logic was or how that was supposed to affect anything.
You don't know how it affects something when you're being attacked by one person versus being attacked by one person that's supported by a whole ass country? You don't understand you don't know what he's saying?
And nobody up there questioned it either.
No, I think he's just trying to bring it back to saying, but it's Hamas. And it's like, okay, but that was not the question posed.
Yeah, that's my take also.
Okay. Do you think they have one AirPod in each ear because they're sharing one brain between both of them? Or
we're going to talk a lot about the numbers later in the video, but given that this is going to be a huge part of the entire first half of the debate, I just want to make sure to say at least some things about it now. So the Wall Street Journal reports that United States intelligence has confidence in the Gaza Ministry of Health's numbers. They use it in their own briefings.
abuse tactic? Do we do the... I'm just kidding. This is... I can't. I don't even watch this. I already know what he's going to do. I can already tell. The specific claim was that the current numbers have been revised down. That's true. I already read 2 articles about it. This is not contested. The current numbers have been revised down. You saying that in the past these numbers have been reliable is not a counter to the claim. It's not a rejection or a refutation of the argument that the current numbers have been revised down. Are you about to just give the historical numbers?
Has confidence in the Gaza Ministry of Health's numbers. They use it in their own briefings. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State said further that the actual death toll may likely be higher. And an Israeli magazine, Meow, reported that Israeli intelligence sources concluded that the Gaza Ministry of Health numbers are, quote, generally reliable, and they use them in their own briefings. So that goes...
You're using a general reliability as a refutation of a specific claim. Your Honor, my client is being accused of rape. My client is 30 years old. Generally, he hasn't raped anyone. Generally, he doesn't spend the vast majority of his time raping people. 35 years of existence, and basically every single part of his life, and almost all of his life, he's not raping anybody, Your Honor. Well, this isn't even even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't refute the claim that the current numbers have been revised downwards. And if this is a 5-hour video and they've got 140 sources, so right now I'm treating them as idiots, but they're not idiots, okay? They're not idiots. They're malevolent. They're evil. Because if they really truly spent 5 hours on this video, and if they really truly Googled around and put all this research together, then they would have come across the fact that the numbers were revised downwards. And I'm willing to bet that if I were to Google Gaza deaths revised, UN revises death toll for women and children. Why is the UN citing lower death toll for women and children? Here's the real problem with the UN's revised Gaza. Gaza government says, this is 47 minutes ago. Why UN lowered Gaza death toll for women and children? Gaza death toll, UN says numbers of deaths remains unchanged after controversy over revised data. Will they at least respond to this? Because if you Google it, you immediately see it. And you guys have 140 some sources. So if you Google it, you immediately see this claim. Are you going to respond to something specific, or are we just going to make the general claim?
Goes completely against the propaganda that you keep hearing that, if you trust Israel, how could you possibly trust these Gaza Ministry of Health numbers? They're all from Hamas. Israel has no way of tracking these numbers themselves. They're not collecting all the bodies like the Gaza Ministry of Health is. They're able to maybe do some really rough estimates, but they trust that the Gaza Ministry of Health is the most generally reliable source that they have access to. And Vice, Michael Moynihan's former employer, further validated Meow magazine's reporting and found the same thing from Israeli intelligence sources. Further, that same Vice report found that NATO also considers the Gaza Ministry of Health numbers accurate and uses them in their own briefings. So basically, the entire West trusts these numbers. Israel trusts these numbers. You don't have to trust Hamas.
So they're not going to refer to that downward revision. They're just going to pretend it doesn't even exist. They're not even going to say they're not going to say anything about it. They're just going to
trust that these are just the best numbers that we have available right now.
But yeah, no, obviously when you're waging
okay, nice, good propaganda.
A war, it's going to be brutal, and it's deeply unfortunate. There are, of course, rules of war, and I suppose we can discuss in bigger detail of how that's being engaged right now. And I think that's the question that is the hottest question that I see.
And we will get to the next question. Eli?
Well, I think we should start. A lot of a talking point you'll hear on the left usually is the war didn't start on October 7th, and that's true. So we should look at the 5-6 previous skirmishes or wars or rocket wars, whatever you want to call them, and ask the question, why didn't Israel finish off Hamas? They haven't changed. And the reason is because they understood that Hamas fights in such a despicable way as to maximize the civilian casualties on their own side. We all know, we've heard this before, that they will launch rockets from schools and mosques and so forth. But there was always, it was known to the Israelis, in fact it was known to human rights organizations, it was known to news agencies for many years that the headquarters of Hamas's Qassam brigades, their military wing, was under the largest hospital in Gaza. Who does such a thing? Unless there is a deliberate strategy to both maximize civilian casualties on your adversary side as well as the...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to guess, doing a big guess here. Hopefully I'm totally wrong. And it'll be other dumb shit. I wonder if they're going to respond to this entire point by rolling the video of Israel showing one of the tunnels underneath the hospital saying, wow, this was the command center. That's all they showed. And they're going to ignore everything else said here. Just going to have that one video. But or refer to that video. But maybe not. Let's see what else he says.
People you purport to govern. Now, the atrocities committed on October 7th were just so inhumane and so barbaric and savage that it left Israel no choice but to confront this dilemma that it had been dealing with for the past 17 years. It has to destroy this organization, despite the fact that it has spent nearly 2 decades building up an infrastructure. I might add, with aid provided that was supposed to go to the people of Gaza to build an entire underground city just for its fighters and commanders so that they can be safe as Israel retaliates for the atrocities committed by Hamas. So when you are dealing with such a stark choice, yes, there are going to be civilian casualties because the army, the military that is usually supposed to protect those civilian casualties, would rather sacrifice them for a PR victory. And
none of this is contested. Hamas doesn't contest this, okay? Hamas doesn't deny any of this.
Kind of simple thing. So back to your question. Is it a just war? It absolutely is a just war, but it's more than just a just war. It's a necessary war. Because what Israel must do in eliminating Hamas is to show to every other dirtbag Islamist terrorist group and nation state like Iran that this tactic of fighting wars will not prevail. Because if Hamas survives, then you will better believe that the next wars that are fought by various kinds of fanatical terrorist groups will continue to learn from their tactics. So in my view, it's an easy question. Of course it's a just war. It's a necessary war. And when Israel finishes, hopefully, Baruch Hashem, and Hamas is no more, they ought to win a Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, so personally, I don't know that I've heard a lot.
Why are these stupid fucks laughing or giggling? What is the laugh and giggle here? Oh man, they must be about to destroy this point then. Oh my goodness, here we go.
Okay, so personally, I don't know that I've heard about a lot of Nobel Peace Prizes for just completely annihilating and crushing your enemy. Have you heard of one?
I just can't even joke about something like that.
I mean, there's a lot of bad Nobel Peace Prizes given out.
For
You know,
sure.
because they're usually given out to like horrible people. That,
Right, right.
You mean like when Arafat got one in '93 for the Oslo Accords? And then proceeded to sit by and basically condone, if not outright encourage, the Second Intifada when the entire world was begging him to have it end, and he just sat in his little compound in Ramallah until he fucking died. That guy that got the Nobel Peace Prize, that one? Are we referring to those kinds of Nobel Peace Prizes, or?
Right,
that made peace.
politics.
Or, when it was given to Obama, I don't even...
Yeah, and it's like he droned kids.
Yeah,
or
he just
whatever.
wasn't George W. Bush. So, like there's a lot of bad ones, but not usually for annihilating. I mean, if Eli wants to start a Nobel War Prize, all the power to him.
I'm sure he would.
Yeah, but I think that's a little wild. Okay, so of substance, a couple things to talk about in that section. One of them being the claims of Hamas using human shields. So that's just like a little bit misleading. So I want to clarify what's actually happening when people say that.
Oh boy.
So there's no evidence that Hamas forces civilians to stay in certain locations for their military goals. Basically.
The Finkelstein / kind of Amnesty International talking point. I'm guessing this mainly comes from Finkelstein. One, there has been evidence that Hamas has told civilians not to flee in this recent war. Number one, but number two, human shields don't require you to force civilians to stay in an area. It only requires the co-location of civilians and military objects for the purposes of gaining an advantage. So firing rockets from schools and mosques and homes would count as utilizing human shields because you're hoping that your opponent won't attack those areas, because if they do, they're going to be in big trouble.
Basically to disincentivize Israeli attacks. There's been allegations of this that have gone around. I've seen like little videos trending on Twitter and people saying like, oh, they're blocking people from going someplace. Yeah, but this has like never been validated by anyone independent. And we wouldn't have where we are right now. Some people have moved out of Rafah because they're attacking Rafah, but they wouldn't have all like clustered in Rafah to be safe if they were being blocked from going there. So that that basic fact alone kind of points against the narrative. And
how about the fact that how about the fact that a camp outside of Rafah just had 50-some people die as it was set on fire because of a camp that was set up right next to a massive munitions factory that showed an actual fucking, was it a mortar launcher sitting like meters outside of a tent? Like we literally saw a video of this like a couple weeks ago. We literally saw it right next to it. What do we consider that? Like we just had a huge event that happened like this.
When the ICC, the International Criminal Court, dropped their charges against Hamas leaders and also Netanyahu, in the charges against Hamas leaders, they included a bevy of war crimes, right? And using human shields in an act of like we are intentionally placing them in harm's way sort of definition, that is a war crime. And they investigated this. And
I don't remember reading that. Is human shields a war crime? I don't even think human shields have an international definition. It's considered part of customary international law that you can't use human shields. I know that. Actually, no, wait, I'm sorry. No, I don't even think that's considered, you're not supposed to do it because it's kind of a contravention of other agreements. But I don't believe human shields. Can somebody point this to me in the Rome Statute? Well, there's not many. We can look at what
placing them in harm's way, sort of definition. That is a war crime, and they investigated this.
I mean, we can read them all. War crimes is willful killing, torture, or inhuman treatment, including biological experiments, willfully causing great suffering, extensive destruction and appropriation of property, compelling a prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in the forces of a hostile power, willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial, unlawful deportation or transfer or unlawful confinement, taking of hostages. Other serious violations of the laws and customs applicable in international consequences, establishment, namely the following: intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, intentionally directing attacks against personnel, installations, materials, or violence charge of the United Nations, intentionally launching an attack in the knowledge the check will cause incidental loss of life or injury to civilians, damage, attacking or bombarding towns, villages, killing or wounding a combatant who, having laid down his arms, against improper use of flag of truce, the transfer directly or indirectly by the occupying power, intentionally directing attacks. Wait, hold on. Against buildings, dedicated religion, arts, protecting people who are in power, adverse for physical mutilation, declaring no quarter will be given, destroying or seizing enemy's property, declaring abolish multinationals. 23 is what he's referring to? XX. Oh, utilizing the presence of a civilian or other protected person to render certain points, areas, or military forces immune from military operations. Oh, this would be considered the human shield part. But we know that this is uncontested that Hamas has done this. Even Amnesty International, I had this for my debate prep for Finkelstein, because I tried to only use their sources, or sources that they would accept. This is in the 2009 report. This is just for Castellet. This isn't even for any of the conflicts afterwards. Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups also violated international humanitarian law in their conduct within Gaza. They launched rockets and located military equipment. And Amnesty International, July 2009, 20 days of destruction. I must have copied the title here. They launched rockets and located military equipment and positions near civilian homes, endangering the lives of the inhabitants by exposing them to the risk of Israeli attacks. They also used empty homes and properties as combat positions during armed confrontations with Israeli forces, exposing the inhabitants of nearby houses to the danger of attacks or being caught in the crossfire. This is just one Amnesty International report. This is going by the most biased on their side. This isn't even contested. Even international human rights groups won't contest this, really. They might contest the exact usage of the word human shield while going on to describe what would be considered human shields, but it's just, this isn't even a contested thing.
Intentionally placing them in harm's way, sort of human shields in an active we are intentionally placing them in harm's way, sort of definition. That is a war crime, and they investigated this and did not include this as one of the war crimes charges. Now, this doesn't; these are not charges from this current conflict. These are charges from the 2019 conflict. But just if you're looking at the track record,
wait, is that true? I thought the ICC were considering charges. I thought it was for the current conflict. Am I wrong?
This isn't what you see, and there's no hard evidence of that happening. Now, if you think about that, is it really plausible? Is this narrative even plausible? That Hamas would have the degree of support it has amongst Palestinians, which is much too high, in my opinion, obviously, if they wanted their people dead.
Who do you think started suicide bombing?
I don't think so. And I don't think a human, maybe you can.
I don't think so. Thanks, white dude in America. Thanks, white American. Thanks, Captain Whitey.
Find some human beings who they're just so ideologically deranged, they're crazy, that like maybe that is what they want. But I don't think you can have millions of human beings like pursuing death.
Have you ever heard of Nazi Germany or World War II Japan? What are you talking about? You don't think a lot of people could support insane regimes for insane reasons? What do you mean? I don't think a lot of what the fuck kind of white splaining Western splaining is this? What are you talking about?
But I don't think you can have millions of human beings like pursuing death. That is just so anti-evolutionary, so anti-human nature, and I think you have to have some racist views to.
This is when I read the paragraph from the author of that book. By the way, this is what he means when he says these people are actually ethnocentric. These people are actually really the racist ones. That like, oh, well, every single group in the world probably thinks like I do, I guess. And all groups of people through all points in time probably have the exact same thoughts that I do. Yeah, everybody in all of human history has been like white Americans, I think. Yeah, like the white Americans that live in like San Francisco. I think every single person in the world is like, yeah, all like that. We're all like that, right? All of us are the exact same. Tabula rasa. Every single person is we're all the exact same person from one to the next, from John to Jacob to Ibrahim and Abdul, and we're all the exact same. Yes. What a retarded fucking point.
To think that. And I think that there are some racist presuppositions that go around about this conflict. So, I mean,
yes, racism. What a just like when Jews are like, oh, it's all anti-Semitism. Like these guys sound like, oh, it's all racism.
There's a really famous line from Golda Meir, who's a one of the Israeli prime ministers from 1957, where she said, "Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us." I mean, I
just hate this because you hear constantly people say that we have to do this war because of self-preservation. If this war-
what is it? What is the? Are we gonna? We just present that quote as this, and then what do we?
Isn't waged. People say that we have to do this war because of self-preservation. If this war isn't waged, Israel will be destroyed. That is exactly the same kind of self-preservation mindset that Palestinians use when they're going in to fight and do crimes. What do you think? They're doing it for fun? But again, this is this mindset that these people...
Oh, wait, hold on. So you just gave a justification for fighting and doing crimes. Wait, so then they do have a justification for fighting? You don't think that the utilization of martyrs or... Wouldn't it be crazy if there were even like specific words that some cultures might have for people that might die in conflicts? What if there were like literally specific terms, maybe that some people would have to talk about like martyrs for causes? Like
people are distinctly different from all other humans. Yeah. For preservation mindset that Palestinians use when they're going in to fight and do crimes. What do you think? They're doing it for fun? But again, this is this mindset that these people are distinctly different from all other humans. Yeah.
No one is saying that. Every culture, every group of people have like different struggles, different motivations, different reasons for doing what they do, different actions that they partake, different things that they value or treasure. Like. Destiny, and you said Islam isn't related to the conflict? When did I say Islam has no relation to the conflict? Robert, is enticed. What part of the stream did I say that? That it has no relation to the conflict? When did I say that?
Reason their motives are completely upside down, and of course there are actual suicide bombers and things like that throughout history and throughout culture. That's not even unique.
And throughout Palestinian history in particular.
Yeah,
that was part of the Second Intifada.
But to describe...
Wait, they have suicide bombers? I just thought we said that it would be crazy. Wouldn't it be crazy to support something that causes civilian death? But they do have suicide bombers? Wait.
They're doing it for fun, but again, this is this mindset that these people are distinctly different from all other humans. For some reason, their motives are completely upside down. And of course, there are actual suicide bombers and things like that throughout history and throughout culture. That's not even unique.
And throughout Palestinian history in particular.
Yeah.
That was part of the Second Intifada.
But to describe an entire ethnic group as innately loving death is just...
Who's what?
Not even scientific. It's not even based in human evolution, like you said.
Yeah, no, I want to be clear. Like, there are some truly ideologically deranged people. It's not...
Please, God, don't name any brown ideologically deranged people. Only the white ones. Please be careful. God, I hope he doesn't name any non-white ideologically unhinged people. Please. Nazis are safe. Italians are safe. KKK. Please don't name any non-white people.
Yeah, no,
or just don't name anybody, okay?
I want to be clear. Like, there are some truly ideologically deranged people. It's not clear if this was Hamas or not, because Palestinian Islamic Jihad and just also some kind of like random angry people followed Hamas into Israel on
What is that? Can somebody tell me? Muin Rabbani tried this talking point on me too. It wasn't just Hamas. It was also ordinary citizens. How does that make it better? What is this talking point? Started watching since Turkey Tom documentary. Appreciate the content, my man. Thank you. What is this talking point? What is it supposed to prove? Random angry people came and raped and murdered people and took hostages? What is the... Like, you understand that makes it sound so much worse.
And, you can watch videos of just the horrible, like, needless things that they did just, like, clearly out of anger. I saw this video where...
Clearly out of anger.
A shovel or something, and beheaded somebody who was, like, injured, bleeding on the ground. And this person wasn't even an Israeli or a Jew. Right. This person was a Thai immigrant worker. It's appalling. So there are some people like that. Like, I don't mean to deny this, and it is relevant to the conflict. But to say that this is the entire Palestinian people, or like the 30, 40-ish%, I don't have the polling in my notes here, that support Hamas, it's just like blatantly false on its face.
Well, it's propaganda. It's the way that people talk about the other tribe.
Yes.
And that's why this quote disturbs me so much, because it's exactly what people say in the process of dehumanizing the other tribe so that they can easily commit those kind of horrors. Because when you talk about people and you say they are less than human, they love death, it's that much easier to do those kind of sick and terrible things. And so I don't care what side you're on. When you use that rhetoric, you are in the process of perpetuating the state of mind that allows to dehumanize innocent individuals.
God, I love it is nice. Let's just take a moment to appreciate the privilege of like analyzing, like, I don't like it when other people on the planet use dehumanizing language. Why can't we just like get in a circle and all hold hands and love each other and play music and dance and be at a festival and just have fun? And like, why do we have to use bad words and like be mean to people? It's like,
solely because you've identified them with that other death-loving tribe. It's so dangerous. It should be given a pass to no one on no side because of what it begets.
Yes, and what you said there, that is a quote that goes around, where there's a misstated Hamas quote that's used to in the media all the time to impute this sort of feeling to the Palestinian people. And the quote is, "We love death more than you love life." You may have seen that before if you look it up, or we'll throw it in the sources. And that's not the exact quote. The exact quote is the Al-Qassam Brigades loves death, right? And that's a huge difference because the Al-Qassam Brigades is the militant armed wing.
How is that? If the U.S. military had the quote, "We love death more than you love life," and somebody's like, "Bro, Americans are crazy," we'd be like, "Hold up, excuse me. That's the U.S. Army slogan, not America's slogan." What the fuck?
What?
Of Hamas. So, these people are jihadist terrorists. Yeah. They're monsters. Like, it's completely bad that they...
Wait, hold on. Hamas are jihadist terrorists? They're crazy jihadist terrorists? Why is Hamas in power again? What happened? How did they initially come into power as the administrators in Gaza? How did they get there?
Feel this way, but it's specifically jihadists saying this to strike fear in their opponents, okay? You can't then take that and impute that. Yeah, you can't even impute that to all of Hamas. Like, it's just...
That is Hamas. Just because it's because it's Al-Qassam Muhammad. Like, you see like the weird words. You're like, okay, I guess that like Al-Qassam brigades, that's like a totally separate thing. It's like if they're like 10 million miles away from this other thing, Hamas and these other weird Arabic symbols, they're totally unrelated. Like you can't take something from Al-Qassam brigades and make it sound like any of that. That has nothing to do with Hamas. It's a totally separate thing because there's a whole new Wikipedia entry for it. What is the...
Just the soldiers, okay? But it's specifically jihadists saying this to strike fear in their opponents, okay? You can't then take that and impute that. Yeah, you can't even impute that to all of Hamas. Like, it's just the soldiers, right? Like, but you certainly...
It's not all of Hamas, it's just the soldiers.
Impute it to all of the Palestinian people. And there's just no shortage of Israeli quotes that if you wanted to do the same thing, you could. So let me give one example. There's something called the Hannibal Directive.
Oh my God! Oh, the Hannibal Directive. This amorphous thing that is, I don't think has ever manifested in all of fucking Israeli military history that people claim happened on October 7th, where Israel will kill as many of their civilians as possible to prevent them from falling into the hands of the enemy. They'll kill as many civilians as possible. By the way, the same retarded fuck country that traded one soldier for like fucking 2,000 Palestinian fucking prisoners. What the fuck was this guy's name? I don't even... How many people did they trade for this fucking dude? No offense. I hope this guy's living a good ass life right now. Jesus Christ. "1,027 Palestinian prisoners were released, some of whom were convicted of multiple murders and carrying out attacks against Israeli civilians."
Is a directive that we've never seen like the official copy, so we don't exactly know how it's worded.
Or if it even exists.
And there's been apparently like different interpretations of it at various times and amongst different military members. But it's a directive that says something along the lines of rather than letting Israelis be taken captive,
we'll kill all of them.
It's better to shoot in their direction, even if it risks killing them. Here's one quote you could totally make a misrepresentation like this with. That is, one statement of a version.
You're talking about a theoretical doctrine that you don't even have any evidence of existing in any hardline way, that's talked about in different ways by different members of the military that you don't even know has ever been applied. You're comparing that to the fucking slogan of the Hamas military? That's your comparison?
The Hannibal Directive, which is in 2011, there was a televised briefing of a military commander before entering Gaza for an operation. And what he said in this briefing on television was, "No soldier from the 51st Battalion can be kidnapped. A soldier should detonate his hand grenade and blow himself up with the person trying to abduct him."
Yeah, incredibly brutal.
Yeah, I mean, that's bad.
That's war.
I don't want to see that happen to people. And if I wanted to stretch this quote into saying, like, Israelis would rather, like, blow themselves up, than they love their lives, not exactly very hard to do that. So now it is true, of course, to give kind of like...
I know it isn't great, but didn't the new UN report say something about 14 people being killed via Hannibal Directive? It did. It listed that in there. It said 14 people were killed possibly because of the Hannibal Directive. I tried to search for, like, what the fuck is there evidence for that in there, and they have nothing. They just say that. Unless somebody has some other source or quote for that, I have no idea why that wound up in there. Because they listed it in there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then I don't see I don't see any idea. Hold on. Somebody linked it. The commission is aware of allegations that the ISF used the Hannibal Directive to prevent the capture of Israeli civilians and their transfer to Gaza, even at the cost of killing them. Such allegations were made in relation to ISF actions in the Nova site, including reports of ISF attack helicopters shooting at Israeli civilian cars, resulting in the deaths or in the killings of Israelis. The commission confirmed the presence of at least 8 attack helicopters in various locations on October 7th, but it could not confirm that they shot at civilians or civilian cars, including the areas of the festival. The commission documented one statement by an ISF tank crew confirming that the crew had applied the Hannibal Directive by shooting at a vehicle which they suspected was transporting abducted ISF soldiers. The commission also verified information indicating that in at least 2 other cases, ISF had likely applied the Hannibal Directive, resulting in the killing of up to 14 Israeli civilians. One woman was killed by ISF helicopter fire while being abducted from near Oz to Gaza by militants. In another case, the commission found that Israeli tank fire killed some or all of the 13 civilian hostages held in a house in Berea. I don't know where they get the source for this Hannibal Directive was applied, and it wasn't just them fighting with or exchanging fire with I don't want to say Hamas, I guess, whatever militants were. I don't know what the source is for this. If anybody has any idea or wants to link it or has some kind of source, I'd be curious. But I have no idea what the source is for this statement. If anybody wants to shoot me a link to that, if there's anything out there, yeah.
The other side, that Hamas does fight from civilian locations. I'm not justifying this. Like it's really bad because it does contribute to the huge number of civilian casualties. But it's also kind of hard for them to do anything else because Gaza is one of the most densely populated regions in the world. It's as densely populated.
But they don't even have a uniform. So it's so densely populated they can't even wear military uniforms. Okay, we're not spending 5 hours on this. I realized, I understand why this guy is so educated, though. Somebody linked this. History Speaks and I are developing a podcast series covering the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict from origins to present.